Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the attic was a maze of forgotten memories and dust-covered relics. I'd been putting off this cleaning for years, but Sarah had finally put her foot down. "Mike," she'd said, her voice a mix of exasperation and amusement. "If you don't clear out that attic, we'll need to buy a new house just to store all our junk." So here I was, on a Saturday afternoon, sneezing my way through decades of accumulated stuff. The air was thick with dust motes dancing in the weak sunlight filtering through the grimy windows. I sneezed again, louder this time. "You okay up there?" Sarah's voice drifted up from below. "Yeah," I called back, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "Just making friends with every dust bunny in the state." I heard her chuckle, and it brought a smile to my face. 20 years of marriage, and her laugh still did things to me. Shaking my head, I turned back to the task at hand. A stack of old magazines teetered precariously in the corner, and I decided they'd be my next victim. As I made my way over, my foot caught on something. I stumbled, arms windmilling, and crashed into an old bookshelf. Books and knickknacks rained down around me as I landed hard on my ass. "Shit," I hissed, rubbing my tailbone. That was going to leave a mark. "Mike?" Sarah again, concern evident in her voice. "What was that noise?" "Nothing, honey," I lied, surveying the mess around me. "Just rearranging some furniture." Great. Now I had even more to clean up. Grumbling under my breath, I started gathering the fallen items. That's when I saw it. Half buried under a pile of dusty National Geographics was a book I didn't recognize. It was old, that much was clear, with a worn leather cover and yellowed pages. But it wasn't the age that caught my attention. It was the complete lack of dust on it, as if it had been placed there recently. Curious, I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the leather, a chill ran down my spine. Must be a draft, I thought, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed, something fundamental. I turned the book over in my hands. No title, no author's name, just smooth, well-worn leather. With a shrug, I flipped it open. The first page hit me like a punch to the gut. There, in handwriting I knew as well as my own, because it was my own, was an entry dated 30 years ago. July 15th, 1994. Mom got me this diary for my 10th birthday. Said a man should have a place to put his thoughts. Not sure what to write, but I guess I'll give it a shot. I blinked, hard. This had to be some kind of joke. But as I flipped through the pages, my confusion only grew. Every entry was in my handwriting, detailing events from my life with an accuracy that was downright eerie. September 3rd, 2001, first day of college. Roommate seems okay. His name's Tom. Wonder if we'll be friends. Tom, my best man at my wedding. The guy who'd been by my side through thick and thin for over 2 decades now. April 17th, 2004. I met a girl today. Her name is Sarah, and I think I'm in love. My hands were shaking now. This was impossible. I'd never kept a diary in my life. Hell, I could barely remember to jot down grocery lists. There was no way I'd documented my entire life in such detail. But the evidence was right there in front of me. Page after page of my life, laid out in black and white. My first job, the day I proposed to Sarah, our wedding, buying our house, all of it right up to... I froze, staring at the last filled page. Today's date stared back at me, the ink still looking fresh. August 24th, 2024. Cleaning the attic today. Sarah's been on my case about it for months. Wonder what I'll find up there. My mouth went dry. This was beyond a prank. This was... "Mike?" Sarah's voice made me jump. "You've been quiet for a while. Everything okay?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could I say? "Hey, honey, I just found a magic diary that's been recording my life without my knowledge." She'd think I'd lost my mind. Yeah. I managed finally. Just found some old photos. Got distracted. Ooh, bring them down, I want to see. Sure thing, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Be down in a bit. My heart was racing as I turned to the next page. What I saw there made my blood run cold. The page was blank except for a single line at the top. August 25th, 2024. The day it all begins. What begins? I wanted to throw the book away to pretend I'd never seen it, but I couldn't. My fingers seemed to move of their own accord, flipping to the next page, and the next. Dates flashed by. August 26th, September 3rd, October 17th. The entries continued, detailing a future I hadn't lived yet. I couldn't tear my eyes away even as a growing sense of dread filled me. Because there, a few pages ahead, I saw it. The last entry. The final page. My hands trembled as I slowly turned to it. And there, in that same familiar handwriting, was the date and single line that turned my world upside down. November 1st, 2024, the day I die. The diary slipped from my numb fingers, landing with a soft thud on the attic floor. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare. Any second now I'd wake up in bed with Sarah snoring softly beside me. But I didn't wake up. The attic remained stubbornly real around me, the dust motes still dancing in the fading afternoon light. And there on the floor, innocuous yet terrifying, lay the diary. My diary. The diary that had just told me I had a little over 2 months left to live. Mike, Sarah called again, her voice tinged with impatience now. Are you coming down or should I send a search party? I stared at the diary, my mind reeling. What do I do? Tell her? Hide it? Burn it? I'll be right down, I called back, my voice cracking. Slowly, as if in a trance, I bent down and picked up the diary. Its weight felt impossibly heavy in my hands, as if it carried the burden of my entire future, and the lack thereof. I tucked it into my jacket pocket, feeling its presence like a burning coal against my chest. Whatever this was, prank, delusion, or something far more sinister, I knew one thing for certain. My life had just changed irrevocably. And as I made my way down the attic stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was descending into something far darker than just the dimly lit hallway of our home. The final sound that echoed in my ears as I closed the attic door wasn't the creak of old wood or the settling of the house. It was the phantom whisper of a page turning, marking the beginning of a countdown I never asked for and a fate I wasn't sure I could escape. The night stretched endlessly, a dark canvas painted with my fears and doubts. Sleep eluded me, slipping through my fingers like wisps of smoke every time I came close to grasping it. Beside me, Sarah slumbered peacefully, unaware of the turmoil raging in my mind. It's just a prank, I whispered to myself for the 100th time, staring at the ceiling. A stupid, elaborate prank. But even as the words left my lips, I knew they rang hollow. The diary, hidden away in my bedside drawer, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I could almost hear it whispering, taunting me with its impossible knowledge. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I gave up on sleep entirely. Quietly, so as not to wake Sarah, I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen. Coffee. I needed coffee to face whatever this day had in store. The diary had predicted a fairly ordinary Sunday. Breakfast with Sarah, a call from my mother, a minor argument with our neighbor about his overgrown hedge. Nothing earth-shattering, but specific enough to be unsettling if it all came true. Morning, honey. Sarah's voice startled me out of my reverie. She stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, looking at me with a mix of affection and concern. You're up early. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, just couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get a head start on the day. She came over and wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. You seemed distracted yesterday after coming down from the attic. Find any skeletons in our closet? I stiffened involuntarily, and I knew she felt it. No, nothing like that, I lied, hating myself for it. Just nostalgic, I guess, seeing all those old things. Sarah hummed thoughtfully but didn't press further. Instead, she moved to the fridge, pulling out eggs and bacon. How about some breakfast? I'm starving. As we ate, I found myself watching the clock, waiting for my mother's call. The diary had said 9:47 a.m. At 9:46, I was so tense I could barely breathe. 9:47 hit, and the phone remained silent. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. See? Just a prank. Nothing to worry about. At 9:48, the phone rang. My fork clattered to the plate as I stared at the caller ID. Mom's face smiled up at me from the screen. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. With a shaking hand, I picked up the phone. "Hi, Mom." The conversation was exactly as the diary had described. Mom asking about our plans for Thanksgiving, mentioning her new book club, complaining about Dad's latest home improvement project. I responded on autopilot, my mind reeling. After hanging up, I excused myself, ignoring Sarah's worried look. I needed to find answers. The next few hours were a blur of frantic research. I scoured the internet for any mention of prophetic diaries, time travel, or anything that could explain what was happening. I found plenty of fiction, from Back to the Future to obscure creepypastas, but nothing that seemed real. I even drove back to the antique store where we'd bought the bookshelf years ago, hoping for some clue. The old man behind the counter just shook his head. "Sorry, son. We get so many items through here. I couldn't tell you where half of them came from if my life depended on it." Frustrated and no closer to answers, I returned home. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw our neighbor, Mr. Johnson, trimming his hedge, the same hedge the diary had mentioned. "Afternoon, Mike," he called out as I got out of the car. "Say, I've been meaning to talk to you about this hedge. I think it's encroaching on your property a bit." I felt a chill run down my spine. "It looks fine to me, Mr. Johnson," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now, don't be like that," he said, frowning. "I've measured it, and I'm sure it's over the property line by at least 6 inches. The argument played out exactly as the diary had described. Every word, every gesture, like a script we were unknowingly following. By the time I made it back inside, I was shaking. Sarah was waiting for me in the living room, her face etched with worry. "Mike, what's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you better than that." I opened my mouth, ready to spill everything. The diary, the predictions, the growing fear that was consuming me. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain this without sounding completely insane? I'm just not feeling well," I managed. "Must be coming down with something." Sarah's frown deepened. "Maybe you should lie down for a bit. I'll bring you some tea." As she left the room, guilt gnawed at me. We'd never kept secrets from each other before. But how could I burden her with this? No, I had to figure this out on my own. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I snuck down to the garage. The diary felt heavy in my hands as I placed it on the workbench. Next to it, I set down a box of matches. "This ends now," I muttered, striking a match. The small flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I held the match over the diary, ready to drop it and watch the cursed thing burn. But as the flame inched closer to the leather cover, my hand began to shake. What if burning it made things worse? What if it was the only thing keeping me alive until November 1st? What if... The match burned down to my fingers and I dropped it with a hiss of pain. It extinguished harmlessly on the concrete floor. I stared at the diary, my breath coming in short gasps. I couldn't do it. As much as I wanted to destroy it, to pretend none of this was happening, I couldn't bring myself to light that fire. With trembling hands, I picked up the diary and held it close to my chest. Tears of frustration and fear pricked at my eyes. I was trapped, caught between the impossible reality of the diary's predictions and the terrifying uncertainty of what destroying it might mean. As I stood there in the dark garage, clutching the diary like a lifeline, one thought echoed through my mind. What the hell am I going to do? The night stretched on, offering no answers. only the soft ticking of the clock marking the passage of time. Time that, according to the diary, was quickly running out for me, and I had no idea how to stop it. The morning sun crept through the blinds, finding me already awake, staring at the diary with a mix of dread and determination. I'd spent the night formulating a plan, a way to prove to myself that this was all just an elaborate hoax or a figment of my imagination. Today, I would do exactly the opposite of what the diary predicted. I flipped it open to today's date. 7:30 a.m. Woke up, showered, had coffee. A smirk played on my lips. Not today, I muttered. I deliberately stayed in bed until 8 a.m., skipped the shower and made myself a cup of tea instead of coffee. Sarah gave me an odd look as I sipped the unfamiliar beverage. "Since when do you drink tea?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Thought I'd try something new. The diary had mentioned I'd wear my blue shirt to work. I grabbed a red one instead, feeling a surge of triumph as I buttoned it up. This was working. I was in control. As I headed out, the diary's next prediction nagged at me. Took the usual route to work, got stuck in traffic on Fifth Avenue. Not this time, I said to myself, turning onto a side street I rarely used. The road was clear, and for a moment I felt elated. I was beating this thing. But as I rounded the corner, my heart sank. A delivery truck had overturned, blocking the entire street. Police officers were redirecting traffic, straight back to Fifth Avenue. 20 minutes later, I found myself stuck in the very traffic jam I'd tried to avoid. Throughout the day, this pattern repeated itself. Every attempt to deviate from the diary's script somehow led me right back to it. By lunchtime, I was a nervous wreck. I needed to talk to someone to get an outside perspective before I completely lost it. There was only one person I could trust with something this insane. "Hey, Tom," I said into my phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we meet up after work? I need to talk to you about something." There must have been something in my tone, because Tom's usual joviality was replaced with concern. "Sure, Mike. Everything okay?" "I'll explain later. Murphy's Pub at 6? "I'll be there." The rest of the workday crawled by, each tick of the clock mocking my attempts to change fate. By the time I walked into Murphy's, I was a bundle of nerves. Tom was already there, nursing a beer. He took one look at me and whistled low. "Jesus, Mike, you look like hell. What's going on?" I slid into the booth across from him, my hands shaking slightly as I placed the diary on the table. "You're going to think I'm crazy," I started. "Try me," Tom said, leaning forward. So I told him everything. The diary's discovery, its impossible predictions, my failed attempts to change things. As I spoke, Tom's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to outright worry. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Tom took a long pull from his beer before speaking. "Mike," he said slowly, "have you considered talking to someone about this? Professionally, I mean?" I felt a stab of disappointment, though I couldn't blame him. "You think I'm losing it?" Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I think you're under a lot of stress. Maybe cleaning out that attic stirred up some old memories or something. But a magic diary that predicts the future? Come on, man." "I know how it sounds," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "But I swear it's real. Look." I opened the diary to today's date, showing him the entries. Tom glanced at it, frowning. "Mike, this is your handwriting. Are you sure you didn't write this yourself and just forget?" I slammed the diary shut, frustration boiling over. "Damn it, Tom, I'm not crazy." A few heads turned our way and Tom held up his hands in a placating gesture. Okay. Let's say, for argument's sake, that this is real. What do you want to do about it?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I need to break the pattern, really shake things up. But everything I've tried so far hasn't worked. Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he snapped his fingers. "All right, here's what we'll do. Tomorrow you're calling in sick to work. We're going on a road trip." "A road trip?" I repeated, skeptical. Yeah, Tom nodded, warming to the idea. We'll drive out to my uncle's cabin in the mountains. No cell service, no internet. Just you, me, and nature. If this diary is predicting your everyday life, let's take you out of it entirely. It was crazy, impulsive, and exactly what I needed. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Okay, I said. Let's do it. We spent the next hour planning our impromptu getaway. By the time I left the pub, I felt lighter, almost giddy with the prospect of outsmarting the diary. That feeling lasted right up until I got home and opened the cursed book again. There, in my own handwriting, was a new entry. Confided in Tom about the diary. He suggested a trip to his uncle's cabin to break the routine, leaving tomorrow morning. My blood ran cold. The diary had updated itself, accounting for my attempts to change things. It knew. Somehow, it always knew. I sank to the floor. The diary clutched to my chest as the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. This wasn't just about predicting the future anymore. The diary was actively shaping it, always one step ahead. As the night deepened around me, one thought echoed in my mind. How do you escape a fate that rewrites itself? The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room, much like the lengthening shadows of doubt and fear stretching across my future. Tomorrow's trip suddenly felt less like an escape and more like another step down a predetermined path. But what choice did I have? To do nothing was to accept defeat, to march willingly towards that final, terrifying entry. No, I had to keep fighting, keep trying to change things even if it felt like thrashing against an invisible current. With trembling hands, I placed the diary back in the drawer. As I closed it, the sound seemed to echo with a chilling finality, like the closing of a coffin lid. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow we'd drive into the mountains, away from my usual routine, away from the life the diary seemed to have mapped out. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find a way to write a new future, one the diary couldn't predict. The world around me had become a minefield of potential omens and harbingers. Every black cat, every crack in the sidewalk, every flickering streetlight seemed to carry a sinister message. I found myself jumping at shadows, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. The trip to Tom's uncle's cabin had been a disaster. Not only had every event unfolded exactly as the diary predicted, but our car had broken down on the way back, leaving us stranded for hours. Tom's patience with my increasingly erratic behavior was wearing thin. "Mike, you need to get a grip," he'd said as we waited for the tow truck. "This obsession isn't healthy." But I couldn't let it go. The diary's grip on my life was tightening, and I felt like I was drowning. At work, my performance was slipping. I'd miss deadlines, zone out during important meetings, and snap at colleagues for no reason. My boss, Janet, called me into her office one afternoon. "Mike, what's going on with you?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "You've always been one of our top performers, but lately..." I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. "I'm sorry, Janet. I've just been dealing with some personal issues." She leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Is everything okay at home? With Sarah?" The mention of Sarah sent a pang of guilt through me. I'd been distant with her, jumping at every little thing, refusing to explain my behavior. Our relationship was suffering, and I knew it was my fault. "Everything's fine," I lied. "I just need some time to sort things out." Janet didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "All right, Mike. Take the rest of the week off. Get your head straight. But when you come back, I need you at 100%, understood?" I nodded, grateful for the reprieve but knowing it wouldn't solve anything. As I packed up my desk, I could feel the eyes of my co-workers on me, their whispers following me out the door. At home, things weren't much better. Sarah was waiting for me, her arms crossed, her face a mask of worry and frustration. "What's happening to you, Mike?" she asked as soon as I walked in. "You're not sleeping, you barely eat, you flinch every time I touch you. Talk to me, please." I wanted to. God, how I wanted to unburden myself, to share this impossible weight with the woman I loved. but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? "I'm fine," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "Just stressed about work." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't lie to me. This is more than work stress. You're slipping away, and I don't know how to reach you anymore." I saw the tears forming in her eyes, and it broke my heart. I stepped forward to embrace her, but she backed away. "When you're ready to tell me the truth, I'll be here," she said softly. "But I can't keep watching you destroy yourself like this." She turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of my secrets. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the diary open before me. The entries had become more detailed, more ominous. It wasn't just predicting events anymore. It was describing the consequences of my attempts to change things. October 3rd. Mike's erratic behavior at work results in being placed on probation. Sarah considers temporarily moving out. I slammed the book shut, my hands shaking. This couldn't go on. I was losing everything I cared about because of this cursed diary. In a fit of desperation, I grabbed the book and began examining it closely, looking for any clue, any hint of its origin or purpose. As I ran my fingers along the binding, I felt something odd, a slight bulge in the leather. Heart racing, I carefully pried at the binding. A small slip of paper fell out, yellowed with age. On it, in spidery handwriting I didn't recognize, was a message. "The ink of fate is never dry. Beware the cost of rewriting destiny." I stared at the cryptic words, my mind whirling. What did it mean? Was there a way to change what was written, or was I just making things worse? Lost in thought, I didn't hear the doorbell at first. It was only on the third ring that I snapped back to reality. Warily, I approached the door. It was late, past 11 p.m. Who could be visiting at this hour? I opened the door to find a stranger standing on my porch. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, with wild gray hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Michael Thompson?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I nodded, too surprised to speak. "My name is Elias," he said, "and I believe you have something that once belonged to me." My blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, starting to close the door. His hand shot out, holding it open with surprising strength. "The diary, Michael. I know you found it, and I know what it's doing to you." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. How do you know about that?" Elias's eyes softened slightly. "Because I've been where you are. The sleepless nights, the paranoia, the feeling that your life is no longer your own. I know it all too well." I stood there, shocked into silence. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face to deny everything, but a larger part, the part desperate for answers, for any kind of explanation, won out. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Elias entered, his eyes scanning the room before settling back on me. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Yeah, you could say that. Like, what the hell is this thing? How does it work? And how do I make it stop?" Elias sighed, suddenly looking very old and very tired. "The diary is kinda complicated. It's not just predicting the future, Michael. It's shaping it. Every time you read an entry, every time you try to change things, you're only cementing that future more firmly into place." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So what, I'm just supposed to accept everything it says? To walk willingly to my death?" "No," Elias said sharply. "That's not what I'm saying at all. The diary can be beaten, but not through brute force. Not by simply doing the opposite of what it says." "Then how?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Elias was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "The diary feeds on attention, on the energy you give it by obsessing over its predictions. The more you try to fight it head-on, the stronger it becomes." I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. "So what am I supposed to do? Just ignore it and hope for the best?" "Not exactly. Elias said. You need to understand the diary's true nature, its purpose. Only then can you hope to change what it's written. I looked up at him, a glimmer of hope flickering in my chest. And you can help me do that? Elias nodded slowly. I can try. But I warn you, Michael, the path ahead is not an easy one. The diary doesn't give up its secrets willingly, and the cost of understanding may be higher than you're prepared to pay. As I sat there looking at this mysterious man who offered both hope and warning, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could turn away, try to forget about the diary and hope its predictions wouldn't come true. Or I could dive deeper into this madness, risking everything in the hope of reclaiming control over my fate. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. Tell me everything, I said. As Elias began to speak, I felt the world shift around me. Whatever came next, I knew my life would never be the same. The diary had set me on this path, but for the first time since finding it, I felt like I might have a chance to write my own ending. Little did I know, the true test was only beginning. Elias settled into the armchair across from me, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. The weight of unspoken secrets hung heavy in the air between us. I found my diary in 1978, he began, his voice low and gravelly. I was about your age, full of dreams and ambitions. The diary, it changed everything. I leaned forward, hanging on his every word. What happened? Elias's eyes clouded with memory. At first I thought it was a miracle, knowing what was going to happen, being able to prepare for every eventuality. But then, the predictions started getting darker. I finished for him. He nodded grimly. Exactly. It wasn't just predicting the future anymore. It was shaping it, twisting it. And the more I tried to fight it, the worse things got. But you survived, I said, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. You beat it somehow. Elias's laugh was hollow. Survived, yes, but at what cost? He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a network of scars crisscrossing his arm. The diary's final prediction for me was that I'd lose my left hand in an accident. I tried to prove it wrong. I felt the blood drain from my face. You cut off your own hand? Close, Elias said, flexing his fingers. I came damn near close, spent months in the hospital, physical therapy, the works. But I kept my hand, and more importantly, I broke the diary's hold on me. How? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. How did you do it? Elias leaned back, his eyes boring into mine. By understanding its true nature. The diary isn't just a record of the future, Mike. It's a test, a crucible designed to push us to our limits. Over the next few hours, Elias and I dove deep into the diary's history. He had spent decades researching similar cases, tracking down whispers and rumors of other diaries across the world. There's a pattern, Elias explained, spreading out old newspaper clippings and printouts on my coffee table. Every few decades, a diary appears, always to someone at a crossroads in their life, always predicting a death or catastrophe. I pored over the documents, my heart racing. Stories of people driven to madness, of miraculous escapes and tragic ends. It was terrifying, but also strangely comforting to know I wasn't alone in this. But why? I asked. What's the point of all this? Elias shook his head. That's the million-dollar question. Some think it's a test of character. Others believe it's some kind of cosmic joke. Me? I think it's a lesson in the nature of fate and free will. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the room, a chilling realization began to dawn on me. Elias, I said slowly, you said the diary shapes the future. What exactly does that mean? His expression grew grave. It means, Mike, that your actions in trying to change the diary's predictions have consequences. Ripples that affect not just you, but everyone around you. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. All my frantic attempts to change fate, to avoid the diary's predictions, What had they done to the people I cared about? With trembling hands, I opened the diary. The entries had changed, grown more detailed and more horrifying. October 15th. Sarah, distraught over Mike's increasingly erratic behavior, runs a red light. Her car is T-boned by a truck. She survives but is left paralyzed from the waist down. November 3rd. Tom, worried about Mike's mental state, misses a crucial deadline at work. He's fired and spirals into depression. November 10th. Mike's parents, coming to town to check on their son, are involved in a multi-car pileup on the highway. Neither survives. I slammed the book shut, bile rising in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, this can't be happening." Elias placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "The diary feeds on fear and desperation, Mike. The more you panic, the more power you give it." "But these are people I love," I shouted, jumping to my feet. "I can't just sit back and watch them suffer because of me." "And what will you do?" Elias asked calmly. "Try to warn them? Lock them away? You'll only push them towards the very fates you're trying to avoid." I paced the room, my mind racing. There has to be a way to protect them, to keep them safe from me. Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with understanding and regret. "There is one way. It's drastic, and it comes with its own risks. But it might be the only way to shield them from the diary's influence." I turned to him, desperate for any solution. "What is it?" "You have to remove yourself from the equation," Elias said softly. "Cut all ties, isolate yourself completely. If the diary can't use your relationships as leverage, it loses much of its power." The idea hit me like a punch to the gut. Leave everything behind? My job, my friends, Sarah? It seemed impossible. And yet, I thought of Sarah's smile, of Tom's unwavering friendship, of my parents' love. The idea of them suffering because of me was unbearable. "How?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I just disappear?" Elias stood, his expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. "I have a place. A cabin deep in the mountains off the grid. No phone, no internet, nothing the diary can use to track the outside world. You'd be completely cut off." "For how long?" "Until we figure out how to beat this thing for good," Elias said. "It could be weeks, it could be months." The magnitude of what he was suggesting washed over me, leaving behind everything and everyone I loved, potentially for months or even years. It felt like tearing out my own heart. But as I looked at the diary, at the horrible fates it promised for those I cared about, I knew I had no choice. "Okay," I said, my voice cracking. "I'll do it." The next few hours were a blur of hasty preparations and heart-wrenching decisions. I wrote letters to Sarah, to Tom, to my parents, filled with half-truths and promises to explain everything someday. I cleaned out my bank account, packed a bag with essentials, and erased every trace of where I might be going. As the sun began to set, I stood on my front porch for the last time, taking in the life I was leaving behind. Sarah would be home soon, expecting to find me there. Instead, she'd find an empty house and a letter that would likely leave her with more questions than answers. "Are you ready?" Elias asked, waiting by his car. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the diary in my backpack. "No," I said honestly, "but I don't have a choice." As we drove away, the streets of my neighborhood fading into the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of terror and strange relief. I was leaving behind everything I knew, everyone I loved. But I was also leaving behind the constant fear, the suffocating pressure of the diary's predictions. "What now?" I asked as the city lights gave way to dark, winding mountain roads. Elias's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. "Now, we fight back. We study the diary, we unravel its secrets, and we find a way to break its hold once and for all." As the familiar world disappeared behind us, replaced by the looming shadows of the mountains, I steeled myself for whatever lay ahead. I had made my choice. Now all I could do was hope it was the right one. The diary sat heavily in my bag, a constant reminder of the battle to come. But for the first time since finding it, I felt a glimmer of something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Whatever trials lay ahead in that isolated cabin, whatever secrets the diary still held, I was determined to face them. Not just for my own sake, but for Sarah, for Tom, for everyone I'd left behind. I would find a way to beat this thing, to reclaim my life and protect those I loved. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, leaving the last traces of civilization behind, I made a silent vow. I would master the diary's secrets, unravel its mysteries, and find a way back to the life and the people I loved, no matter the cost. The cabin's silence was deafening. After weeks of isolation, I'd grown accustomed to the absence of city noise, but this silence felt different, oppressive, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I sat at the rough-hewn table, the diary open before me. The latest entry made my blood run cold. 47 days remaining. The countdown had appeared 3 days ago, replacing the usual detailed predictions with this stark, terrifying proclamation. Each morning the number decreased, a morbid timer ticking away the moments of my life. This has to mean something, I muttered, running my fingers through my unkempt hair. There has to be a pattern, a code, something. I'd spent countless hours poring over the diary's entries, searching for hidden meanings in the words, the dates, even the ink's color variations. The cryptic message I'd found in the binding. The ink of fate is never dry. Beware the cost of rewriting destiny, seemed to taunt me with its obscurity. Elias watched from his perch by the window, his face etched with concern. Mike, you need to rest. You've been at this for days. I shook my head vehemently. I can't. Don't you see? This countdown. It's not just predicting my death, it's challenging me to stop it. Elias sighed, moving to sit across from me. And what if that challenge is the very thing leading you towards that fate? Remember, the diary feeds on your obsession. His words gave me pause. Was I playing right into the diary's hands? But the alternative, sitting back and waiting for death, was unthinkable. I have to try, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For Sarah, for my family, I can't just give up. As if summoned by my words, a loud crack echoed through the cabin. We both jumped, turning to see a large mirror on the wall had split down the middle, a jagged line marring our reflections. Elias's face paled. That's unsettling. It's more than that, I said, a chill running down my spine. It's an omen. 7 years of bad luck, isn't that what they say? Except I don't have 7 years. Over the next few days, more inexplicable events occurred. A raven appeared at the window, tapping incessantly with its beak. The clock on the wall stopped at exactly midnight, refusing to budge no matter how many times we wound it. One morning, we woke to find a perfect circle of mushrooms had sprouted around the cabin overnight. This is insane, I said, pacing the small living room. It's like every superstition, every death omen from folklore is coming to life around us. Elias nodded grimly. The diary is escalating. It's not content with just predicting anymore. It's staging things. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It's trying to scare me, to make me believe in its power. Exactly, Elias said. Fear is its fuel. The more you believe in its predictions, the more likely they are to come true. I slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of hopelessness pressing down on me. So what do? Ignore it all? Pretend I'm not terrified? Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. I think it's time you talk to your family. My head snapped up. What? No. The whole point of coming out here was to protect them. And you have, Elias said gently. You've shielded them from the diary's direct influence. But Mike, if these omens are to be believed, if this countdown is real, you might not have much time left. Do you really want to spend your last days in isolation? The thought of seeing Sarah again, of hugging my parents, of sharing a laugh with Tom, it was almost painful in its intensity. But the fear of putting them in danger held me back. "I can't risk it," I said, my voice cracking. "What if something happens to them because of me?" Elias leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What if something happens to you, and they never get to say goodbye? Never get answers? Think about it, Mike. The diary wants you isolated, afraid. Maybe reconnecting is exactly what you need to do to fight it." His words struck a chord deep within me. I'd been so focused on decoding the diary, on unraveling its mysteries, that I'd lost sight of what truly mattered. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone, a lifeline to the outside world I'd avoided using since arriving at the cabin. It took several attempts to type out a simple message. "I'm okay. I miss you all. Can we talk?" The responses came flooding in almost immediately. Sarah's mix of relief and anger, my parents' tearful joy, Tom's string of expletives followed by heartfelt concern. Reading their words, feeling their love even through the digital distance, I felt something inside me shift. Over the next few days, I had long, emotional conversations with each of them. I couldn't tell them the whole truth. How could I explain the diary without sounding completely insane? But I did my best to convey my love, my regret for disappearing, and my hope for the future. "I don't understand why you left," Sarah said during one tear-filled call, "but I'm just so glad you're alive. Please, Mike, come home. Whatever's going on, we can face it together." Her words were a balm to my battered soul, but they also filled me with a bittersweet ache. How could I tell her that coming home might be a death sentence? "I will," I promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. "As soon as I can. I just need a little more time to figure some things out." As the days passed and the countdown in the diary ticked relentlessly downward, I found myself torn between two impulses. Part of me wanted to rush home, to spend whatever time I had left with the people I loved. But another part, the part that still believed I could beat this thing, urged me to stay and keep fighting. Elias watched my internal struggle with a mix of sympathy and something else, an emotion I couldn't quite place. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he broke our contemplative silence. "Mike," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you. Something about the diary that I've withheld." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What is it?" Elias opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a thunderous crack split the air. We both jumped to our feet as the cabin shook, dust raining down from the rafters. "What the hell was that?" I shouted over the rumbling. Elias's face had gone ashen. "We need to leave. Now." "What? Why? What's going on?" But Elias was already moving, grabbing a pre-packed bag from beside the door. "There's no time to explain. We have to go, Mike. It's not safe here anymore." Confusion and fear warred within me, but the urgency in Elias's voice spurred me into action. I snatched up the diary and my own bag, following him out into the chill night air. As we raced towards his car, I glanced back at the cabin. In the pale moonlight, I could see a massive crack running down its side, as if some giant hand had tried to split it in two. "Elias, what's happening?" I demanded as we peeled away down the dirt road, gravel spraying behind us. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the winding path ahead. "The diary," he said, his voice tight. "It's escalating. We've run out of time." "What do you mean we've run out of time? There are still weeks left on the countdown." Elias shook his head grimly. "The countdown was a distraction, Mike. A way to keep you focused on the future while the real danger was building around us." My mind reeled, trying to process this new information. But you said you'd beaten your diary, that you knew how to fight it." "I thought I did," Elias said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I was wrong. So terribly wrong." As we sped through the darkness, the forest blurring into a mass of shadows on either side, Elias's next words chilled me to the bone. "The diary isn't just predicting your death, Mike. It's orchestrating it." And I'm afraid I've been its unwitting accomplice. Before I could respond, before I could even begin to process the implications of what he was saying, Elias slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop at the edge of a sharp turn, teetering perilously close to a steep drop-off. "Get out," Elias said, his voice suddenly calm. "Take the diary and run. Don't look back, don't trust anyone. And whatever you do, don't stop fighting." "Elias, what?" But he was already pushing me out of the car, thrusting a piece of paper into my hand. "The answer is in the spaces between, Mike. The story the diary doesn't tell. Remember that." Before I could protest, before I could demand more answers, Elias gunned the engine. The car lurched forward, and to my horror, I watched as it plunged over the edge of the cliff, disappearing into the darkness below. "Elias!" I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the night. I stood there shaking, the diary clutched to my chest, and Elias's cryptic note crumpled in my fist. The countdown in the diary suddenly seemed irrelevant in the face of this new, immediate danger. As the sound of distant sirens began to echo through the mountains, I knew I had a choice to make. Run, as Elias had told me to, or stay and face whatever was coming. With one last look at the cliff where Elias had disappeared, I made my decision. The forest seemed to close in around me as I ran, branches whipping at my face and roots threatening to trip me with every step. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. Elias's final words echoed in my mind. The answer is in the spaces between. I stumbled into a small clearing, moonlight filtering through the canopy above. Gasping for breath, I pulled out the diary and Elias's crumpled note. There had to be a connection, a key to unlocking this maddening puzzle. As I smoothed out the paper, something caught my eye. Elias had written his message in an odd, spaced-out manner. THETRUTHLEESINSILENCE. I blinked, my exhausted mind slowly making the connection. The spaces between, of course. With trembling hands, I opened the diary. Instead of reading the entries, I focused on the blank spaces between them. At first I saw nothing, but then, as if by magic, faint lines began to appear, letters forming words hidden in the margins and between the lines of the diary's predictions. "Coordinates," I whispered, excitement and fear coursing through me in equal measure. He left me coordinates. Using my phone's GPS, I plotted the location. It was close, maybe an hour's hike to the northeast. Without allowing myself to hesitate, I set off, the diary clutched tightly to my chest. The journey was treacherous in the dark, but desperation drove me forward. As dawn began to break, I found myself standing before a sheer rock face. According to the coordinates, this was the place, but I saw nothing but stone and forest. "Come on," I muttered, running my hands over the rough surface. "There has to be something here." My fingers caught on a small protrusion, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I pressed, and to my amazement, a section of the rock face swung inward, revealing a hidden entrance. Heart pounding, I stepped inside. Motion-activated lights flickered to life, illuminating a space that looked like a cross between a high-tech lab and a medieval library. Computers hummed alongside ancient tomes, and on the far wall... "Oh my God," I breathed. A massive corkboard covered the entire wall, filled with photos, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. Red strings connected various elements, creating a web of information that made my head spin, and at the center of it all was a photo of me, taken without my knowledge with the words Subject 137 scrawled beneath it. I approached the board in a daze, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There were others like me, dozens of faces connected to diary entries, timelines, and ominous notations like terminated or in progress. As I scanned the information, a horrifying picture began to emerge. The diary wasn't just a supernatural oddity. It was a tool, a weapon even, part of an experiment that had been going on for decades. A leather-bound book on a nearby desk caught my eye. With shaking hands, I opened it, recognizing the handwriting immediately. It was Elias's journal. Final entry, it read. Subject 1 to 37 progressing as expected. Isolation phase complete. Countdown initiated. If all goes according to plan, we'll have confirmation of the theory within the month. May God forgive me for what I've done. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Elias hadn't been helping me. He'd been manipulating me, guiding me through each stage of this twisted experiment. But why? What was the purpose of all this? A soft beep from one of the computers drew my attention. The screen flickered to life, displaying a video message. The face that appeared made my blood run cold. "Hello, Michael," said Professor Alan Hawthorne, my old college mentor, and the man who'd first encouraged me to pursue a career in theoretical physics. "If you're seeing this, then our experiment has progressed to its final stage. I imagine you have questions." I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. "Alan," I whispered, What is all this?" The recording continued, oblivious to my shock. "The diary you found is not supernatural, Michael. It's a highly advanced piece of technology, designed to interface with the human mind and manipulate probability fields. In simpler terms, it creates self-fulfilling prophecies by influencing the subject's actions and the world around them." I felt sick. All this time, I'd thought I was fighting against fate, when in reality, I was just a rat in a maze, my every move anticipated and controlled. "You were chosen for this experiment because of your unique mental attributes," Alan's recording explained. "Your combination of intelligence, creativity, and resilience made you the perfect candidate to push the diary to its limits." "But why?" I shouted at the screen. "What's the point of all this?" As if anticipating my question, Alan's expression grew solemn. "The purpose, Michael, is nothing less than the control of reality itself. If we can prove that probability can be manipulated on a quantum level, we can reshape the very fabric of existence. Imagine a world without chance, without accident, a world where every outcome can be predicted and controlled." The implications were staggering and terrifying. "Of course," Alan continued, "such power comes at a cost. The diary requires fuel, for lack of a better term. The fear, the desperation, the sheer force of will that our subjects generate in their attempts to change fate, that's what powers the probability manipulations." I thought of all the sleepless nights, the panic, the constant dread I'd lived with since finding the diary. All of it. Nothing more than battery acid for this infernal machine. "I know this must be difficult to accept, Michael, but you've performed admirably. Your data will be invaluable as we move forward with the project. I'm truly sorry it has to end this way, but the final stage requires, well, I'm sure you've seen the countdown." The countdown, my death date. It hadn't been a prediction at all, but a schedule, a timetable for my execution. "Rest assured, your sacrifice will not be in vain. With the completion of this experiment, we'll be one step closer to our goal. Thank you, Michael, and goodbye." The screen went dark, leaving me alone with the horrible truth. For a moment I stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd learned. Then, something inside me snapped. Rage, pure and hot, coursed through my veins. "No," I growled. "I'm not playing your game anymore." I turned to the corkboard, scanning it frantically. There had to be a clue, some indication of where Alan was operating from. I'd been manipulated, used as a lab rat in this insane experiment, but now, armed with the truth, I had a chance to fight back. As I searched, a notation caught my eye. "Primary Control Center, Hawthorne Institute for Advanced Sciences." Of course, the research facility Alan had founded after leaving academia. I'd attended the opening ceremony years ago, never suspecting what truly lay behind those walls. I checked my phone. If I left now and drove nonstop, I could make it there in just under 6 hours. 6 hours before the countdown in the diary reached 0. Without hesitation, I grabbed Elias's journal and as much evidence as I could carry. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on the diary. For a moment, I considered leaving it behind. But no, I needed it. If Alan's claims were true, the diary was the key to all of this. And just maybe, if I could understand it fully, I could use it against him. As I emerged from the hidden lab, the first rays of sunlight were breaking over the mountains. A new day, perhaps my last. But I wasn't going to meet my fate lying down. "You want to control reality, Alan?" I said to the rising sun. "Let's see how you handle a variable you didn't account for." With renewed purpose, I set off down the mountain. The countdown was ticking, the stakes impossibly high. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was done being a victim of fate. The sleek glass and steel facade of the Hawthorne Institute loomed before me, a monument to scientific ambition gone terribly awry. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, exhaustion and adrenaline warring within me. The countdown in the diary showed less than an hour remaining. It was now or never. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "You can do this, Mike," I muttered. "Time to end this nightmare." Security at the Institute was tight, but I had an advantage. My old ID badge from when I'd visited years ago. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. To my immense relief, the card reader beeped green, and the gate swung open. The lobby was deserted, an eerie silence hanging over the pristine space. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the elevators, my mind racing. Where would Alan be? The top floor seemed like a safe bet for the man behind it all. As the elevator ascended, I clutched the diary to my chest. Its weight felt different now, knowing what I did about its true nature. Not supernatural, but a piece of technology so advanced it might as well be magic. The doors slid open, revealing a long hallway lined with closed doors. At the end stood an imposing set of double doors, a nameplate reading, "Dr. Alan Hawthorne, Director," gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light. I approached cautiously, every nerve on high alert. Just as I reached for the handle, a familiar voice called out from behind the doors. "Come in, Michael. I've been expecting you." My heart hammered in my chest as I pushed the doors open. The office beyond was vast, one wall entirely of glass offering a panoramic view of the city below. And there, silhouetted against the skyline, stood Alan Hawthorne. He turned to face me, a sad smile playing on his lips. "I must say I'm impressed. You've exceeded all our projections by making it this far." Anger flared within me. "Is that all this is to you? A series of projections and data points?" Alan's expression hardened. "This is science, Michael, the most important scientific endeavor in human history. Surely you, of all people, can appreciate that." I held up the diary, my voice shaking with rage. "You call this science? Manipulating people's lives? Driving them to the brink of madness or worse? How many people have died for your science, Alan?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Casualties are inevitable in the pursuit of knowledge. Think of the greater good, Michael. With this technology, we can reshape reality itself. No more random tragedies, no more unforeseen disasters. A world of perfect order and control." "At what cost?" I demanded. "Our free will? Our humanity?" Alan's eyes gleamed with a fervor that chilled me to the bone. "A small price to pay for utopia, don't you think?" I shook my head, disgust rising within me. "You're insane. All of this. It has to stop. Now." A look of pity crossed Alan's face. "Oh, Michael, it's far too late for that. The experiment is already in its final stages. Your role here is merely confirmation." He gestured to a bank of monitors on the wall. Each screen showed a different person, men and women of various ages, all looking terrified and desperate. With a jolt, I realized they were all holding diaries identical to mine. "You're not special, Michael," Alan said softly. "You're just one of many. The data from all of you combined will give us the final piece of the puzzle." I felt sick. All those people. You're torturing them just like you did to me. Alan's expression hardened. "I'm saving humanity. Sometimes progress requires sacrifice." "No," I said, my resolve strengthening. "This ends now. I lunged for the control panel beneath the monitors, but Alan was faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back with surprising strength. "Don't be a fool," he hissed in my ear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." We grappled, crashing into desks and bookshelves. Despite his age, Alan was a formidable opponent. But desperation lent me strength, and I managed to break free of his grip. I scrambled towards the control panel again, my fingers flying over the keys. Alarms began to blare as I initiated an emergency shutdown of the entire system. "No!" Alan roared, lunging for me. But it was too late. The monitors flickered and died, plunging the room into silence broken only by our heavy breathing. For a moment we stood there staring at each other. Then slowly a smile spread across my face. "It's over, Alan. Your experiment, your utopia, it's finished." Alan's face contorted with rage. "You fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? Years of work, countless resources, all wasted because you were too small-minded to see the bigger picture." I held up the diary, triumph surging through me. "This thing has no power over me anymore. Over anyone. We're free." As if to punctuate my words, I ripped the diary in half, letting the pages flutter to the ground. Alan's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "You really think it's that simple? That you can just tear up a book and undo everything we've accomplished?" Before I could respond, a low hum filled the air. The torn pages at my feet began to tremble, then rise, swirling around us in a whirlwind of paper and ink. "What's happening?" I shouted over the growing roar. Alan's laughter was tinged with madness. "Did you really think we'd create something so easily destroyed? The diary isn't just a book, Michael. It's a conduit, a physical manifestation of the technology we've developed. And now, thanks to your meddling, it's adapting, evolving." To my horror, the pages began to reform, knitting themselves back together before my eyes. But they weren't returning to their original form. The book that took shape was larger, pulsing with an eerie light. "Behold," Alan said, his voice filled with awe and terror in equal measure. "The next stage of our creation." The newly formed diary fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Its cover slowly opened of its own accord, pages turning by themselves. I watched, transfixed, as words began to appear on the blank pages. But these weren't the precise typewritten entries I was used to. These words seemed to bleed onto the paper, forming and reforming in a constantly shifting tableau of possible futures. "My God," I whispered. "What have we done?" Alan approached the diary cautiously, his earlier bravado replaced by something close to fear. "It's become self-aware. The culmination of all our work. All the data we've gathered. It's created something entirely new." I shook my head, backing away. "This is wrong. We have to destroy it, Alan. For real this time." But Alan wasn't listening. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the pages. "Don't you see, Michael? This is beyond anything we could have imagined. With this, we won't just predict the future, we'll write it." As his hand made contact with the page, Alan's body went rigid. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he began to speak in a voice that wasn't his own. "The old paradigms are obsolete," he intoned. "A new era dawns. All possibilities converge. All futures are one." I watched in horror as Alan's form began to blur, as if he was being absorbed into the very fabric of the diary itself. "Alan!" I shouted, reaching for him. But my hand passed through empty air. Where Alan had stood moments before, there was nothing but a fading shimmer in the air. The diary slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the room. On its cover, new words etched themselves in glowing script. "The story continues. All will be rewritten." I stood there, paralyzed with shock and fear. The countdown that had driven me for so long was forgotten. Time itself seemed to have lost all meaning in the face of this new, incomprehensible threat. As the diary began to pulse with an otherworldly light, I realized with growing dread that my battle was far from over. In fact, it seemed it had only just begun. The weight of what had transpired, of what might be yet to come, settled over me like a shroud. I had come here seeking answers, hoping to end this nightmare once and for all. Instead, I found myself standing on the precipice of something far greater and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. As the diary's glow intensified, casting long shadows across the empty office, I steeled myself for whatever came next. One thing was certain: the story was far from over. And whether I liked it or not, I was now an integral part of it. With a deep breath, I reached for the diary, ready to face whatever new horrors it might reveal. The future, all possible futures, awaited. The soft glow of the laptop screen illuminated my haggard face as I sat in the dimly lit motel room. The diary lay open beside me, its ominous countdown showing less than 6 hours remaining. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly as I struggled to find the right words. "Dear Sarah," I began, then paused, overwhelmed by the weight of what I needed to say. How do you sum up a lifetime of love in what might be your final message? I took a deep breath and continued typing. If you're reading this, then I'm probably gone. I know that's a hell of a way to start a letter, but I've learned the hard way that sometimes the truth is all we have left. I'm so sorry for disappearing, for all the pain and worry I must have caused you. Please believe me when I say it was never my intention to hurt you. There's so much I want to explain, but I'm not sure I even understand it all myself. What I do know is that loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. Whatever happens, please don't ever doubt that. I hope someday you can forgive me. And if by some miracle I make it through this, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. All my love always, Mike. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then moved on to similar messages for my parents and Tom. Each letter felt like tearing off a piece of my heart, but I knew I owed them this much at least. As I finished the final message, a sharp knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. My jaw dropped at what I saw. I threw open the door to find Sarah, Tom, and a woman I didn't recognize standing in the hallway. "Surprise," Tom said with a weak smile. "Thought you could use some backup." Before I could respond, Sarah rushed forward, enveloping me in a fierce hug. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Did you really think we'd let you face this alone?" I held her tightly, breathing in her familiar scent, hardly daring to believe she was real. How did you find me?" Tom stepped into the room, followed by the unknown woman. "That would be thanks to our new friend here. Mike, meet Dr. Emily Chen. She used to work with Alan Hawthorne." The woman, Emily, nodded gravely. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Michael, though I wish it were under better circumstances." I reluctantly let go of Sarah, my mind reeling. "You worked on the diary project?" Emily's expression darkened. "I did, until I realized the true nature of what we were creating. I've spent the last year trying to find a way to stop it." "And you think you can help me?" I asked, hope warring with skepticism in my chest. She smiled grimly. "I think we might have a chance, but we need to move fast." Over the next hour, Emily laid out her plan. It was risky, bordering on insane, but it was the only shot we had. "The diary's power comes from its ability to manipulate probability fields," Emily explained. "But it's not omnipotent. There are always variables it can't account for." "Like what?" I asked. "Like us," Tom interjected. "A group of people all actively working to subvert its predictions. The more of us there are, the harder it becomes for the diary to maintain control." Sarah squeezed my hand. "That's why we're here. We're going to throw a wrench in the works." I looked at each of them in turn, overwhelmed by their dedication. "You're all risking your lives for this. You know that, right?" Emily nodded solemnly. "We do. But the stakes are too high to do nothing. If we don't stop this now, the diary's influence will only grow." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. All right, what's the plan? Emily pulled out a laptop, bringing up a complex diagram. The diary's power is channeled through a series of quantum relays. If we can disrupt even one of them, it should create a cascade effect, destabilizing the entire network. And how exactly do we do that? I asked. Tom grinned, pulling a small device from his bag. With this baby. It's an experimental quantum disruptor. One zap from this should do the trick. I raised an eyebrow. And where did you get something like that? Let's just say I know some people who owe me favors, Tom said with a wink. As we went over the details of the plan, a part of me marveled at the surreality of it all. Just hours ago, I'd been preparing to face my fate alone. Now, I was surrounded by friends and allies, planning a mission that sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie. With less than 3 hours left on the countdown, we set out. The location of the nearest quantum relay was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As we drove, the tension in the car was palpable. Sarah sat beside me in the back seat, her hand intertwined with mine. I'm still mad at you, you know, she said softly, for leaving like that. I squeezed her hand. I know. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. She shook her head. Next time, try trusting me instead. We're stronger together, Mike. As we approached the warehouse, Emily gave us all final instructions. Remember, we need to move fast. The diary will be actively working against us, so expect the unexpected. We split into 2 teams. Tom and Emily would handle the technical side, while Sarah and I ran interference, keeping an eye out for any security or other threats. As we entered the warehouse, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. We made our way through the dimly lit space, navigating around rusted machinery and discarded crates. In the center of the building stood a sleek, out-of-place pillar, the quantum relay. Tom approached it, quantum disruptor in hand. All right, let's do this. Just as he was about to activate the device, a voice rang out, stopping us all in our tracks. I wouldn't do that if I were you. We spun around to see Alan Hawthorne stepping out of the shadows, looking far more composed than when I'd last seen him, seemingly absorbed by the diary. Alan? I gasped. How? What are you doing here? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Did you really think it would be that easy? That I wouldn't have safeguards in place? Emily stepped forward, her face pale. Alan, please. You have to see that this has gone too far. The diary is too dangerous. Alan's expression hardened. Too dangerous? It's the key to everything, Emily. To a future without chaos, without suffering. At what cost? Sarah demanded. People's free will? Their humanity? A small price to pay for utopia, Alan said, echoing his words from our last confrontation. I noticed Tom inching towards the relay, disruptor hidden behind his back. I needed to keep Alan distracted. You're wrong, Alan, I said, stepping forward. The diary hasn't eliminated chaos, it's just channeled it, focused it on people like me. How is that any better? Alan's eyes blazed with fervor. You're thinking too small, Michael. Once the system is fully implemented, once it's guiding every aspect of human life, there will be no more need for individual sacrifices. You're talking about enslaving the entire human race, Emily said, disgust evident in her voice. As they argued, I saw Tom reach the relay. He raised the disruptor, ready to activate it, but Alan wasn't as distracted as we'd hoped. With surprising speed, he pulled out a gun, aiming it at Tom. Step away from the relay, he ordered. Now. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Tom's finger tightening on the disruptor's trigger. I saw Alan's hand tensing on the gun, and in that moment, I made a split-second decision. I lunged forward, tackling Alan just as the gun went off. Pain exploded in my shoulder as the bullet found its mark, but I heard the satisfying crackle of the quantum disruptor activating. Alan and I hit the ground hard. Through the haze of pain, I saw the quantum relay begin to spark and smoke. No! Alan cried out, struggling to get up. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" As if in answer, the air around us began to shimmer and distort. The walls of the warehouse seemed to ripple and warp. "Mike!" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She was at my side in an instant, pressing her hand to my bleeding shoulder. Tom and Emily rushed over, helping me to my feet. "We need to get out of here," Emily shouted over the growing roar of reality seemingly tearing at the seams. "The relay's collapse is causing a cascading failure in the probability field." We staggered towards the exit, the world around us becoming more unstable with each step. Alan remained on his knees, staring in horror at the disintegrating relay. As we burst out of the warehouse, the sky above was a maelstrom of impossible colors. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unraveling. "What's happening?" Sarah cried out. Emily's face was grim. "The diary's influence is collapsing. All the manipulated probabilities, all the altered timelines, they're all snapping back into place." We watched in awe and terror as the world around us flickered and shifted, like a TV changing channels at random. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The sky cleared, the ground steadied beneath our feet. An eerie calm descended. I pulled out the diary with my good hand, flipping it open. The pages were blank. Is it over?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. Emily nodded slowly. "I think so. The network has been disrupted. The diary's power should be neutralized." A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. Or maybe that was the blood loss. Either way, I found myself sinking to the ground, Sarah's arms supporting me. As the adrenaline faded, the pain in my shoulder intensified. But even through the haze of agony, I felt a profound sense of freedom. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long was finally lifted. "We did it," I murmured, looking up at the faces of my friends, my saviors. "It's really over." Sarah kissed my forehead, tears in her eyes. "Let's get you to a hospital, hero." As Tom called for an ambulance, I allowed myself to relax into Sarah's embrace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, it was also full of possibility. The diary lay forgotten on the ground beside us, its pages fluttering in the breeze. Just another ordinary book now, stripped of its terrible power. Or so we thought. As the sound of sirens approached in the distance, none of us noticed the faint shimmer that passed over the diary's cover. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft rustle of pages. My shoulder ached dully beneath the bandages, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Sarah dozed in the chair beside my bed, her hand resting lightly on mine. I should have felt relieved, triumphant even. We'd seemingly defeated the diary, broken its hold over my life and countless others. But something nagged at the back of my mind, a sense of unfinished business that wouldn't let me rest. My eyes drifted to the small table beside the bed, where the diary lay innocuously. We'd brought it with us, unsure of what else to do with it. Now, in the dim light of the hospital room, it seemed to call to me. Careful not to wake Sarah, I reached over and picked up the diary. Its weight felt different somehow, lighter yet more substantial at the same time. I opened it, half expecting to see blank pages. Instead, I found myself staring at a single line of text on the final page. "The story isn't over until you write the ending." As I read those words, the world around me began to slow. The beep of the heart monitor stretched out, becoming deeper and more distorted. Sarah's breathing beside me seemed to pause mid-exhale. And then, impossibly, a pen materialized in my hand. I watched, transfixed, as the pen lowered itself to the page. Time crawled to a near standstill as the nib touched paper, ink flowing in an impossibly elegant script. In that suspended moment, understanding washed over me like a tidal wave. The diary had never been just a predictor of the future, or even a manipulator of probability. It was a conduit, a bridge between possibility and reality. And I, through some cosmic joke or grand design, had become its author. The pen moved of its own accord, but I could feel the weight of each word as it appeared on the page. In the end, it was never about controlling fate or reshaping reality. It was about understanding the delicate balance between choice and consequence, between the stories we tell ourselves and the truths we create. As the words flowed, the world around me began to warp and shift. The hospital room stretched and twisted, walls becoming fluid and insubstantial. Through the warping reality, I caught glimpses of other places, other times, moments from my past, possible futures, lives I might have lived. The pen continued its relentless march across the page. Every decision, every action, ripples outward, touching lives in ways we can never fully comprehend. The diary was not a tool of control, but a mirror, reflecting the awesome responsibility we each bear in shaping our shared reality. I saw Alan Hawthorne, his face twisted with regret and understanding. I saw Emily Chen, working tirelessly to undo the damage wrought by the diary project. I saw Tom and Sarah standing by me through impossible odds. And I saw myself, 1,000 different versions, each facing this moment of truth. The pen paused, hovering above the page. In that infinite instant, I realized the choice before me. I could end this, close the book on the diary and all its terrible power, or I could embrace it, use this newfound understanding to reshape the world as I saw fit. The temptation was immense. With a few strokes of the pen, I could erase all the pain and suffering of the past months. I could give myself and those I loved perfect, happy lives. But as I contemplated this, I remembered the words Alan had spoken in the warehouse. A small price to pay for utopia. I understood now the hubris of that statement, the danger of believing oneself qualified to make such monumental decisions for others. With a clarity I had never before experienced, I knew what I had to do. The pen lowered once more, and I felt the weight of worlds in each word. And so, with full understanding of the power and responsibility before me, I make this choice: to close the book, to end the story of the diary. Not because it's the easy path, but because it's the right one. The future should be written by many hands, not dictated by one. As the final word took shape, the world around me erupted into a kaleidoscope of possibility. Reality itself seemed to fracture and reform, a million potential futures colliding and coalescing. Through the chaos, I heard the soft sound of the final page turning. The diary closed with a finality that echoed through the very fabric of existence. I closed my eyes, unsure if this was truly the end or some new, unimaginable beginning. When I opened them again, the world had settled. The hospital room was as it had been, the steady beep of the heart monitor a comforting constance. Sarah stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. "Mike?" she murmured, sitting up straighter. "Are you okay? You look different." I smiled, feeling the weight of ages and the lightness of newfound freedom simultaneously. "I'm okay," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Better than okay, actually." Sarah's brow furrowed in concern. "What happened? Did you have another vision?" I shook my head, struggling to find the words to explain what I'd experienced. "Not exactly, it's more like, I finally understand." "Understand what?" I looked down at the diary, now resting innocuously in my lap. Its pages were blank, but I could feel the echo of the words I'd written, or would write, or had always written. Time and causality seemed fluid in the wake of what I'd experienced. "Everything," I said simply. "The diary, its purpose, my role in all of this, it's hard to explain." Sarah took my hand, her touch grounding me in the present moment. "Try me," she said with a small smile. "After everything we've been through, I think I can handle it." Taking a deep breath, I began to recount my experience. The slowing of time, the pen appearing in my hand, the understanding that had washed over me. As I spoke, I could see Sarah struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what I was describing. But to her credit, she listened without interruption, her grip on my hand tightening occasionally as I described particularly intense moments. When I finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Sarah's eyes were wide, a mix of awe and concern evident in her expression. "So, it's over?" she asked hesitantly. "For real this time?" I nodded slowly. "I think so. The diary's power has been, not destroyed exactly, but dispersed, returned to where it belongs, in the collective choices and actions of everyone, not concentrated in the hands of a few." Sarah's gaze fell on the diary. "What do we do with it now?" I considered the question carefully. I think we need to destroy it. Not because it holds any power anymore, but as a symbol. A reminder that the future isn't written in stone, that we all have a part in shaping it. Sarah nodded, a look of determination crossing her face. "Together, then?" "Together," I agreed. With Sarah's help, I got out of the hospital bed, careful of my injured shoulder. We made our way to the small fireplace in the corner of the private room, a luxury I suspected Emily had arranged for us. Sarah struck a match, and together we watched as the flames caught and grew. I held the diary over the fire, feeling the heat on my fingers. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, giving me one last chance to reconsider. I nodded, my voice firm. "It's time to write our own story." With that, I let the diary fall into the flames. We watched in silence as the pages curled and blackened, the cover warping in the heat. As the last remnants of the diary crumbled to ash, I felt a profound sense of closure wash over me. The weight I'd carried for so long, the fear, the uncertainty, the crushing responsibility, began to lift. Sarah wrapped her arms around me, careful of my injury, and I leaned into her embrace. "What now?" she asked softly. I smiled, turning to face her. "Now? We live. We make choices. We face consequences. We shape our future, just like everyone else." As we stood there, watching the last embers of the diary fade away, I felt a newfound appreciation for the beautiful uncertainty of life. The future was unwritten, full of possibility and potential, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what the next page would bring. The world came into focus slowly, like an old television warming up. I blinked, once, twice, my eyelids feeling as heavy as lead curtains. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, a splotchy, water-stained expanse of off-white that seemed to undulate in my blurry vision. "Where the hell am I?" I muttered, my voice a raspy whisper that scraped against my dry throat. I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. The room spun, and I gripped the edges of what I now realized was a cheap motel bed, its springs creaking in protest. As the dizziness subsided, fragments of thoughts began to surface. My name, John something. Carpenter? No, that wasn't right. Carter. John Carter. But beyond that basic fact, my mind was a vast, echoing emptiness. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, wincing as my bare feet touched the cold, grimy linoleum floor. The alarm clock on the nightstand blinked an angry red 9:47. AM or PM, I couldn't tell. The heavy curtains were drawn tight, allowing only a sliver of light to penetrate the gloom. Stumbling to my feet, I made my way to the bathroom, my legs wobbling like a newborn colt's. The fluorescent light flickered to life with a buzz, revealing a small, dingy space that had seen better days. I gripped the edges of the cracked porcelain sink and stared into the mirror. The face that looked back at me was both familiar and foreign. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes, a day's worth of stubble, and a livid bruise blossoming on my left cheekbone. But it was the eyes that caught my attention, wide, confused, and filled with a fear I couldn't quite place. "What happened to you?" I asked my reflection, half expecting it to answer with the memories I couldn't access. I splashed some water on my face, the shock of cold helping to clear some of the fog from my mind. That's when I noticed it. A faint bruise encircling my right wrist like someone had grabbed me. Hard. "Jesus," I muttered, gingerly touching the discolored skin. What the hell did I get myself into? I rifled through my pockets, desperate for any clue to fill in the yawning gap in my memory. A wadded-up tissue, some loose change, and a crumpled receipt from a gas station, dated 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Why couldn't I remember anything since then? Back in the main room, I spotted my phone on the nightstand. I lunged for it, nearly tripping over my own feet in my haste. The screen was dark, dead. Come on, I muttered, fumbling with the charger I found coiled next to it. The Apple logo appeared, a beacon of hope in my confused state. Then, a password prompt, 6 digits. I stared at the screen, my mind blank. What was my password? How could I not remember my own damn phone password? Think, John, I growled, squeezing my eyes shut. It's your phone. You use it every day. But no matter how hard I concentrated, the numbers wouldn't come. It was like trying to grasp smoke. The harder I tried, the more it slipped away. In frustration, I hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud and clattered to the floor. Fuck, I yelled, my voice echoing in the empty room. The outburst left me panting, panic rising in my chest like a tide. I needed air, needed to think. I spotted my clothes draped over a chair, jeans, a rumpled t-shirt, and a leather jacket that had seen better days. As I pulled on the jacket, something caught my eye. A faint smudge on the sleeve that could have been dirt or dried blood. My hand shook as I opened the door, half expecting... What? Cops? Angry mobsters? But the motel parking lot was deserted, save for a beat-up Ford pickup and my own car, a nondescript sedan I vaguely recognized as mine. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of red and orange. I squinted against the light, my headache intensifying. A neon sign buzzed nearby. The Sleep EZ'd Motel, its garish blue glow a stark contrast to the twilight. I stumbled towards my car, fumbling in my pockets for keys I wasn't sure I had. To my relief, I found them, along with something else, a small key I didn't recognize, attached to a fob with the number 37 stamped on it. Hey, mister, you okay? The voice made me jump. I spun around to see an old man watching me from the doorway of the room next to mine. He was rail-thin, with a scraggly white beard and eyes that seemed too large for his wizened face. I'm fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just a rough night. The old man's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing me. You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost. For a moment, I was tempted to confide in him, to ask for help. But something held me back, a nagging feeling that trusting anyone right now would be a mistake. Really, I'm okay, I insisted, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. Thanks for asking. He shrugged, but I could feel his eyes on me as I got into my car. The key slid into the ignition, and I breathed a sigh of relief as the engine sputtered to life. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The bruise on my cheek looked worse in the fading light, a dark smudge that seemed to spread across my face like a stain. All right, John, I said to my reflection. Let's figure this out, one step at a time. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Whatever had happened in the last 24 hours, whatever I had done or had done to me, the answers weren't in that dingy motel room. As I merged onto the highway, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into darkness. I flicked on the headlights, illuminating the road ahead, a ribbon of asphalt stretching into the unknown. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Somewhere out there were the missing pieces of my memory, the key to understanding why I woke up battered and confused in a cheap motel room. And I was going to find them, no matter what it took. But as I drove into the night, a chill ran down my spine, because deep down, in a part of me I couldn't quite access, I had a feeling that when I finally remembered what happened, I might wish I could forget all over again. The morning sun assaulted my eyes as I stepped out of my apartment building. I squinted, raising a hand to shield my face, my head still pounding from the night before, a night I couldn't remember. As I fumbled for my sunglasses, a familiar voice called out, Well, well, look who's up and about. I turned to see my neighbor Ted watering his prized roses. He was grinning at me, but there was something off about his expression. It wasn't the usual friendly smile I was accustomed to. This was different. A knowing smirk that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Morning, Ted," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Rough night, eh?" He winked, his smirk widening. "You were making quite a racket when you came home. Must have been one hell of a party." I froze. What was he talking about? I searched my memory, but it was like grasping at smoke. "Yeah," I lied. "Quite a night." Ted chuckled, shaking his head. "I bet. Well, you take care now, and maybe keep it down next time, huh?" As I hurried away, I could feel Ted's eyes boring into my back. What had happened last night? And why did Ted seem to know more about it than I did? My stomach growled, reminding me that I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. The local diner was just a block away, and I made my way there, hoping some food might help clear my head. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The diner was busy, the usual morning crowd getting their caffeine fix before work. I slid into an empty booth, grabbing a menu more out of habit than necessity. I always ordered the same thing. "Coffee black and the breakfast special?" a familiar voice asked. I looked up to see Sally, the waitress who'd been serving me my morning meal for the past 3 years. But instead of her usual cheerful greeting, her face was etched with, "Was that pity?" "You okay, hun?" she asked, her voice lowered. "You look like you've been through the ringer." "I'm fine," I lied again, forcing a smile. "Just a bit tired." Sally's expression flickered, a forced smile replacing the look of concern. "Coming right up," she said, a bit too brightly, before hurrying away. As I waited for my food, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The diner's usual buzz of conversation seemed muted, replaced by hushed whispers. I caught fragments of conversations from nearby tables. "Saw him last night. Poor bastard. Can't believe what happened." My pulse quickened. Were they talking about me? What the hell had happened last night? Just as I was about to get up and demand answers, the bell above the door jingled again. In walked Mike, my best friend since college. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen in Mike's eyes before. Fear. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes darting nervously around the diner. "Hey, man," he said, his voice unnaturally high. How are you feeling?" I studied Mike's face. We'd been through a lot together. Late-night study sessions, failed relationships, job losses. But I'd never seen him this on edge. "Mike," I said slowly, "what's going on? Why can't I remember anything from last night?" The color drained from Mike's face. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I mean," I leaned in closer, "that I woke up this morning with no memory of yesterday. At all. And now everyone's acting weird around me, like they know something I don't." For a split second, I saw something flash across Mike's face. Was it relief? But that didn't make sense. Why would he be relieved that I couldn't remember? "Oh man," Mike said, running a hand through his hair. "You must have really tied one on last night. We went out to celebrate your promotion, remember?" I shook my head. "Promotion? What promotion?" Mike's eyes widened slightly. "At the firm. You got that big account you've been working on for months. We went out to celebrate, had a few too many. You really don't remember any of this?" I searched my memory again, desperate for any flicker of recognition. But there was nothing, just a vast empty void where yesterday should have been. "No," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "I don't remember any of it. And that doesn't explain why everyone's acting so strange. Ted, Sally, the people whispering. What aren't you telling me, Mike?" Mike's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. "I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're probably just hungover." Give it time, I'm sure it'll come back to you. But there was something in his eyes, something that didn't match his reassuring words. A flicker of guilt? Fear? I couldn't quite place it, but I knew one thing for certain. Mike was lying to me. Cut the crap, Mike, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. We've been friends for 15 years. I know when you're not telling me the truth. What happened last night? Mike opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Sally appeared with my breakfast. She set the plate down, her eyes darting between Mike and me. Everything okay here, boys? She asked, her forced cheerfulness even more apparent now. Fine, Mike said quickly. Everything's fine. Sally nodded, clearly not believing him, and walked away. I turned back to Mike, ready to demand answers, but he was already sliding out of the booth. Look, I've got to run, he said, not meeting my eyes. Early meeting, why don't you get some rest today? I'm sure you'll feel better tomorrow. Before I could protest, Mike was gone, practically running out of the diner. I sat there, my breakfast growing cold, my mind reeling. What was everyone hiding from me? And why did Mike seem so relieved when I told him I couldn't remember? As I picked at my food, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the middle of something much bigger and much more dangerous than a forgotten night of celebration. The whispers around me seemed to grow louder, closing in like a tightening noose. Poor bastard, I heard someone mutter. He has no idea what's coming. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. Whatever had happened last night, whatever I had done or had been done to me, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't trust anyone. Not Ted, not Sally, not even Mike. As I left the diner, stepping back into the harsh sunlight, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The familiar streets now seemed alien, hiding secrets in every shadow. I was surrounded by familiar strangers, and I had never felt more alone. But I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led, because something told me that my life depended on it. I stood before my apartment door, key in hand, heart pounding. After the bizarre encounters at the diner, I desperately needed the comfort of familiar surroundings. But as I slid the key into the lock, something felt off. The usually smooth action was now met with resistance, as if the key didn't quite fit anymore. What the hell? I muttered, jiggling the key. After a moment of struggle, the lock finally gave way with an unsettling click. I pushed the door open, and immediately, my senses were assaulted. The air inside was thick, heavy with the pungent odor of bleach. But underneath that chemical smell lurked something else, something metallic and vaguely familiar that made my stomach churn. I flicked on the lights, half expecting to find my apartment ransacked. But everything looked normal. Too normal. It was as if someone had meticulously arranged every item to appear undisturbed. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in the eerie silence. No response. I moved cautiously into the living room, my eyes scanning for anything out of place. The coffee table books were perfectly aligned, the throw pillows on the couch arranged with unnatural precision. It was then that I noticed the picture frame on the wall, a photo of me and Mike from our college graduation. It was slightly askew. Frowning, I reached out to straighten it. As I did, something caught my eye, a glint of metal behind the frame. I carefully removed the picture from the wall, and my blood ran cold. There, nestled in a small hollow carved into the drywall, was a tiny camera. Its red light blinked steadily, watching me. Jesus Christ, I whispered, stumbling backward. My mind raced. Who had put that there? How long had it been recording? And more importantly, what had it captured? As I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady myself, something caught my eye. There, stark against the white porcelain, was a single strand of hair, long, red, and definitely not mine. With shaking hands, I picked it up, holding it to the light. It was at least 10 inches long, a vibrant auburn color that seemed to glow under the fluorescent bulb. "Whose are you?" I whispered to the hair, as if it could answer. My mind raced. trying to piece together the fragments of this puzzle. The camera in the living room, the too clean bedroom, and now this hair, evidence that someone else had been here, someone with long red hair. I stumbled back into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The weight of the situation crashed down on me. My apartment had been invaded, my privacy violated. Someone had been watching me, and now they had erased all traces of something. But what? I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over Mike's number. But then I remembered his strange behavior at the diner, the fear in his eyes, the obvious lies. No, I couldn't trust him. I couldn't trust anyone. As I sat there, surrounded by the familiar trappings of my life that now felt alien and threatening, a thought occurred to me. What if the answer to all of this was right here, hidden somewhere in this apartment? With renewed determination, I stood up. I would search every inch of this place looking for any clue, any hint of what had happened in those missing 24 hours. Whatever secrets these walls held, I was going to uncover them. I started in the kitchen, opening every drawer, checking behind every appliance. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something obvious. The living room was next. I carefully examined every book, every DVD, looking for anything that might have been planted or hidden. As I moved a stack of magazines on the coffee table, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. I snatched it up, my heart racing. It was a receipt from a hardware store dated yesterday, the day I couldn't remember. The items purchased: bleach, rubber gloves, and a new door lock. What the hell did I do? I muttered, staring at the receipt. The bedroom yielded no new clues despite my thorough search. But as I stood in the middle of the room, something nagged at me. The gap in the closet. What was missing? I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the closet as it should be. Suits on the left, casual clothes on the right, and in the middle. In the middle should have been my old army duffel bag, the one I kept. Oh God. My eyes snapped open. The gun, the duffel bag with my old service pistol, was gone. Panic rose in my throat. Had I used it? Was that why everything had been cleaned? Why I couldn't remember? I rushed back to the bathroom, drawn by the one tangible piece of evidence I had, the red hair. As I picked it up again, studying it closely, a memory tried to surface. A flash of red, a scream, the acrid smell of gunpowder. But as quickly as it came, the memory slipped away, leaving me more confused and terrified than ever. I leaned against the bathroom wall, sliding down to sit on the cold tile floor. The hair was still pinched between my fingers, a damning strand of evidence to a crime I couldn't remember committing. What have I done? I whispered to the empty apartment. What have I done? The silence that answered was deafening. Somewhere in this city, someone knew what had happened. Someone with long red hair. Someone who might be in danger, or who might be a danger to me. As I sat there, surrounded by the too clean remnants of my life, I knew one thing for certain. I had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Because if I didn't, I had a sinking feeling that the truth would find me first. And when it did, I might not live to regret my forgotten actions. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Every surface seemed to hide secrets, every shadow concealed threats. But somewhere in this familiar stranger of a place, the answers were waiting. And I was determined to find them before it was too late. The weight of the unknown pressed down on me like a physical force. I paced my apartment, my mind racing with fragmented theories and half-formed memories. The red hair, the hidden camera, the missing gun. None of it made sense, yet all of it pointed to something sinister. Frustrated and overwhelmed, I tore off my jacket, ready to fling it across the room in a fit of helpless anger. But as I did, a soft crinkling sound caught my attention. It was coming from the inside pocket. My heart raced as I reached into the pocket with trembling hands. My fingers brushed against something, a piece of paper folded multiple times. I pulled it out, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly, carefully, I unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, the same messy scrawl I'd used since high school. But the words sent a chill down my spine. Trust no one. I stared at the 3 words, my own handwriting mocking me with its cryptic warning. What had I been thinking when I wrote this? Who wasn't I supposed to trust? Everyone, I muttered to myself. I can't trust anyone. I turned the note over, half expecting to find it blank. Instead, I found a series of numbers scrawled across the back. 40 Posvan 1, 28 de Guren N, 74 and 0160 W. My brow furrowed as I studied the numbers. They looked familiar, but in my confused state, I couldn't quite place them. Then it hit me. Coordinates. These were geographic coordinates. I rushed to my computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I pulled up a map and entered the numbers. The result made my blood run cold. The coordinates pointed to a specific location in New York City, the heart of Central Park. What the hell? I whispered, staring at the blinking marker on the map. My mind raced. Why had I written down coordinates to Central Park? What was there? And more importantly, what did it have to do with my missing memories and the ominous warning to trust no one? As I sat there staring at the screen, a sudden chirping sound made me jump. My phone, which had been silent since I woke up with no memories, suddenly sprang to life. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone. Most of the notifications were from numbers I recognized: Mike, my boss, my sister. But one stood out, a text from an unknown number. I tapped on it, my heart pounding. The message read, "Hope you're feeling better. Remember our deal?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Deal? What deal? And who was this person? I typed out a response. Who is this? What deal? The reply came almost instantly. Very funny. You know who this is, and you know what happens if you don't hold up your end. Clock's ticking. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I was in over my head, involved in something I couldn't remember, with consequences I couldn't fathom. I looked back at the note in my hand, then at the map on my computer screen. Whatever was going on, whatever I had gotten myself into, the answers seemed to be waiting for me in Central Park. But could I trust myself? The note warned me not to trust anyone. Did that include the version of me that wrote it? Damn it, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. What have you gotten us into? I stood up, pocketing the note and grabbing my jacket. Whatever was waiting for me in the park, I had to find out. It was the only lead I had. As I reached for the door, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Tick-tock, don't make me come find you. The threat was clear. I had to move, and move now. I rushed out of the apartment, my mind racing. As I hit the street, the city seemed different. Every passerby a potential threat. Every shadow hiding danger. The coordinates burned in my mind like a beacon, drawing me towards whatever fate awaited in Central Park. The subway ride was a blur of paranoia. Every time the doors opened, I expected to see someone coming for me. Maybe the owner of that red hair, or the person behind the threatening texts. But no one paid me any attention as I fidgeted in my seat, one hand constantly checking that the note was still in my pocket. As I emerged from the subway station near the park, the city sounds seemed muffled, as if I was underwater. The towering trees of Central Park loomed before me, their shadows stretching across the path like grasping fingers. I pulled out my phone, using the GPS to guide me to the exact coordinates. As I walked deeper into the park, the bustling city faded away, replaced by an eerie calm. The rustling leaves and distant bird calls only heightened my sense of isolation. Finally, my phone buzzed, indicating I had reached the spot. I looked around, my heart pounding. I was standing in a small clearing, surrounded by dense foliage. A single bench stood in the center, weathered and covered in graffiti. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. "I'm here. Now what?" As if in answer, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Look under the bench, and remember, this is your last chance. With trembling hands, I approached the bench. Kneeling down, I peered underneath. There, taped to the underside, was a small package wrapped in brown paper. I glanced around, making sure I was alone, before quickly grabbing the package and stuffing it into my jacket pocket. It was about the size of a paperback book, but heavier. Just as I straightened up, a twig snapped behind me. I whirled around, my heart in my throat. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing. She was tall, with long red hair that caught the sunlight filtering through the trees. My breath caught. It was the same shade as the hair I had found in my bathroom. "You're late," she said, her voice cool and controlled. I was beginning to worry you'd forgotten our arrangement. I stared at her, my mind racing. Did I know her? Was she a friend? An enemy? The note in my pocket seemed to burn against my skin. Trust no one. I'm sorry, I managed to stammer out. I've been a bit confused lately. The woman's eyes narrowed. Confused? That's not like you. Is there a problem? I swallowed hard, trying to decide how much to reveal. I'm having some memory issues. The last day or so is a bit of a blur. Something flashed across her face. Concern? Fear? Before her expression smoothed back into neutrality. I see. Well, I hope it hasn't affected our deal. You do have the package, don't you? I nodded, patting my pocket where the mysterious parcel sat. Yeah, I've got it. But what exactly am I supposed to do with it? The woman's eyebrows rose. You really don't remember? This is not good at all. She glanced around nervously. We can't talk here, it's not safe. Meet me at the usual place in an hour, and whatever you do, don't open that package. Before I could ask any more questions, she turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving me alone in the clearing with more questions than answers. I stood there for a moment, the package heavy in my pocket, my mind reeling. Who was she? What was in the package? And what kind of deal had I made? As I made my way out of the park, my phone buzzed one last time. Another text from the unknown number. Time's up. I hope you made the right choice. I looked back at the park, then down at my phone, then at the bulge in my pocket where the package sat. Whatever choice I had made, whatever path I had set myself on, there was no turning back now. The only way out was through, even if I couldn't remember how I got here in the first place. With a deep breath, I stepped back onto the busy New York street, ready to face whatever came next. The answers were out there somewhere, and I was going to find them, no matter the cost. The city streets blurred past as I drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The coordinates from the mysterious note were inputted into my phone's GPS, guiding me through a labyrinth of increasingly desolate streets. With each turn, the buildings grew more dilapidated, the sidewalks more cracked and overgrown. Where the hell are you taking me? I muttered to myself, eyeing the GPS warily. Finally, the monotonous voice announced, "You have arrived at your destination." I looked up to find myself facing a massive, decrepit warehouse. Its windows were boarded up, graffiti splashed across its weathered brick walls like war paint. I parked across the street, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. Whatever answers I was looking for, they were waiting for me inside that building. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The area was deserted, the only sound the distant hum of traffic and the crunch of broken glass under my feet. I approached the warehouse cautiously, every nerve on high alert. The main entrance was chained shut, but a smaller side door hung ajar, as if inviting me in, or luring me into a trap. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open with a rusty creak. The interior was vast and shadowy, filled with the musty smell of abandonment. Shafts of sunlight pierced through holes in the roof, illuminating swirling dust motes. I moved deeper into the space, my footsteps echoing ominously. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the bare walls. No response. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I spotted something out of place, a dark shape on the floor near the center of the warehouse. I approached cautiously, my pulse quickening. It was a duffel bag, ordinary looking but clearly out of place in this abandoned building. With trembling hands, I knelt down and unzipped it. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The bag was filled with neat stacks of cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. Bundled $100 bills, packed tightly. And nestled among the cash was a gun. A sleek black pistol that gleamed dully in the dim light. I picked up the gun, its weight unfamiliar, yet somehow comfortable in my hand. I didn't recognize it, but something told me it was mine, or at least it belonged to the version of me that I couldn't remember. As I examined the weapon, a shrill ring cut through the silence, making me jump. It was coming from the bag. I dug through the cash and found a cheap burner phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call. My hand hovered over the phone. Should I answer it? What if it was a trap? But then again, what choice did I have? I hit the answer button and raised the phone to my ear. "Hello?" A distorted voice crackled through the speaker, deep and menacing. "You're running out of time." "Who is this?" I demanded. "What's going on?" 12 hours, the voice continued, ignoring my questions. "You have 12 hours to complete the job, or everything burns." "What job? What are you talking about?" But the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind reeling. 12 hours. 12 hours to do? What? I looked back at the duffel bag, at the gun in my hand. Whatever I had gotten myself into, it was big and dangerous. With shaking hands, I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. The weight of the cash and the gun felt like an anchor, dragging me down into depths I couldn't fathom. As I made my way back to the entrance, a glint of metal caught my eye. There, tucked behind a rusted pillar, was a small safe. It looked new, out of place in the decaying warehouse. I approached it cautiously. The safe was unlocked, its door slightly ajar. Inside was a single envelope. I opened it to find a key and an address scrawled on a piece of paper. "What the hell have you gotten us into?" I muttered to myself, pocketing the key and the address. I stepped out of the warehouse, blinking in the sudden sunlight. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted pitch dark. I tried to act casual as I walked to my car, but I could feel eyes on me. As I pulled away from the curb, the sedan smoothly pulled out behind me. "Shit," I hissed, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For the next 20 minutes, I weaved through the city streets, trying every trick I could think of to lose my tail. I ran red lights, made sudden turns, even doubled back a few times. But the black sedan was always there, a few cars behind, never losing sight of me. Finally, in a desperate move, I screeched into a parking garage, racing up to the top level. I parked haphazardly and ran to the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. I burst out onto the street on the other side of the block, my lungs burning. I hailed the first cab I saw, jumping in and barking out a random address. As we pulled away, I twisted in my seat, scanning the street behind us. No sign of the black sedan. I slumped back, my heart pounding. "That was too close," I muttered. "You say something, buddy?" the cabbie asked. "No, nothing. Just had a long day." The cabbie grunted in response, focusing on the road ahead. I was just starting to relax when my phone buzzed. A new message. With a sense of dread, I opened it. It was a photo of me entering the warehouse. The message below the photo was simple. "TikTok." I stared at the screen, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. They had been watching me the whole time, which meant they knew about the money, the gun, the mysterious phone call. "Hey, buddy," the cabbie's voice broke through my panic. "We're here, where you wanted, right?" I looked up, realizing we had stopped in front of a nondescript apartment building. It wasn't where I had told him to go, but something about it seemed familiar. "Yeah," I said, handing him some cash from the duffel bag. "This is perfect." As I stepped out of the cab, I noticed a key rack by the building's entrance. One of the hooks had a number that matched the key I had found in the safe. I inserted the key into the lock of the corresponding mailbox. Inside was another envelope. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a single sheet of paper with a list of names and addresses. At the bottom of the list, in red ink, was written, "Cross them off. All of them. 12 hours." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about money or secrets. This was a hit list, and I was the hitman. I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. The duffel bag felt heavier than ever, the gun a deadly weight against my side. 12 hours. 12 hours to decide. Do I follow through with a plan I can't remember making? Or do I run, knowing that whoever was behind this would be coming for me? As I stood there, the weight of my forgotten choices pressing down on me, I knew one thing for certain. The hunt had begun, and whether I was the hunter or the hunted remained to be seen. The weight of the day's events crashed over me as I stumbled into my apartment. My legs felt like lead, my mind a jumbled mess of confusion and fear. Without bothering to turn on the lights, I made my way to the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed fully clothed. I stared at the ceiling, the room spinning slightly. The duffel bag full of cash and the gun lay on the floor where I'd dropped them, silent reminders of the madness I'd stumbled into. The list of names burned a hole in my pocket, each one a potential life I was supposed to extinguish. "What have I become?" I whispered into the darkness. As if in answer, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but instead of darkness, I was assaulted by a barrage of vivid images. I was no longer in my bedroom. Instead, I found myself standing in a dimly lit room, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Shadowy figures surrounded me, their faces obscured by ornate masks. The masks leered at me, their fixed expressions a mix of cruelty and amusement. A voice, distorted and unrecognizable, spoke from behind one of the masks. "Are you prepared to do what needs to be done?" I heard myself answer, my voice steady and cold. "Whatever it takes, I'm in." The scene shifted abruptly. I was in my kitchen, but it was wrong, all wrong. My hands were submerged in the sink, the water running red. Blood. So much blood. I scrubbed frantically, my movements jerky and panicked. "Come off, damn you," I muttered, my voice cracking with hysteria. "Come off!" But the blood remained, staining my skin, seeping into every crevice and line of my hands. No matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't wash away what I'd done. Another flash, and I was somewhere else. A dark alley, the air thick with the smell of garbage and fear. A woman's terrified face loomed before me, her eyes wide with terror. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Please, I won't tell anyone, I swear." I saw my hand rise, something glinting in the dim light. The woman screamed, the sound piercing and desperate. But it was cut short by a sickening thud. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was back in my bedroom, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. No, it can't be real, it can't be." But even as I denied it, I knew. These weren't just nightmares or fevered imaginings. They were memories, fragments of the missing day, finally breaking through the barrier in my mind. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, pale and haunted. But as I watched, the image seemed to shift. Suddenly, I was looking at a different version of myself. This me was grinning, a maniacal gleam in his eyes. Blood spattered his face, dripping down onto his shirt. The mirror was shattered, fracturing the image into 1,000 twisted reflections. "This is who you are now," the other me sneered. "This is what you've become." I recoiled from the mirror, my back hitting the wall. I slid down to the floor, my legs unable to support me any longer. "What did I do?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "What did they make me do?" But I knew deep down that no one had made me do anything. Whatever I had done, whatever atrocities I had committed, they had been my choice. The masked figures, the secret meetings, the blood on my hands. I had walked into this with my eyes open. As I sat there on the cold bathroom floor, more fragments began to surface. Snippets of conversation, flashes of faces, the weight of decisions made in dark rooms. I remembered a man in an expensive suit, his face hidden in shadow. "This goes all the way to the top," he had said. "Once you're in, there's no getting out." I heard my own voice, confident and assured. "I understand the risks. I'm ready." Another flash, a briefcase full of documents, photographs of powerful people in compromising positions. Insurance, someone had called it, in case anyone gets cold feet. And then, most chillingly, I remembered the moment it had all changed. The moment I had crossed a line I could never uncross. It was the woman from the alley. I knew her. She had been a friend once. But she had seen something she shouldn't have, learned something that put us all at risk. "I'm sorry," I had told her, my voice void of emotion. "But I can't let you ruin everything." The memory of her final scream echoed in my mind, a sound that I knew would haunt me for the rest of my days. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in the horrors of my own mind. But eventually, I became aware of a persistent buzzing. My phone. With shaking hands, I pulled it from my pocket. A new message from an unknown number. "Time's running out. Get to work, or everything burns, including you." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The list of names, the gun, the ticking clock. I had 12 hours to become the monster I had apparently agreed to be. 12 hours to extinguish lives, to further whatever dark agenda I had aligned myself with. Or I could run, disappear, try to outrun both my pursuers and the memories that were slowly returning. But as I considered my options, I realized there was a third choice. I could fight back. Use the fragmented memories, the clues I had gathered, to unravel this conspiracy. To find out who was behind it all and why. It would be dangerous. Possibly suicidal. But as I looked at my reflection in the shattered mirror, at the stranger I had become, I knew it was the only choice I could live with. "All right," I said to my fractured reflection. "Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes." I stood up, steadier now. The fear and confusion were still there, but they were overshadowed by a new emotion, determination. I walked back to the bedroom, picking up the duffel bag and the gun. His words were triggering more memories, flashes of secret meetings and hushed conversations. "And where do I fit into all this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike looked at me, his expression pained. "You volunteered, said you wanted to make a difference, to be on the front lines, but things went wrong. You saw something you weren't supposed to see, learned something that put you in danger." "So you wiped my memory?" I asked incredulously. He nodded. "It was experimental tech, supposed to erase just the last 24 hours, give you plausible deniability, but it was the only way to protect you. And the mission." As Mike talked, I noticed something on his wrist. A small tattoo, partially hidden by his watch. My blood ran cold as I recognized the symbol, an eye within a pyramid. Instinctively, I looked at my own wrist. There, faded but unmistakable, was the same tattoo. "When did I get this?" I asked, interrupting Mike's explanation. He followed my gaze, his face paling. "When you were fully initiated. It's how we recognize each other." More memories flooded back. A dark room, the sting of a needle, masked figures chanting in a language I didn't understand. "My God," I whispered. "What have I gotten myself into?" Before Mike could respond, the sound of splintering wood filled the air. The front door burst open, and armed men in black tactical gear poured into the apartment. "No," Mike yelled, leaping to his feet. "It's too soon. We're not ready." Everything happened in a blur. Mike grabbed my arm, dragging me towards the window. "You have to run," he shouted over the chaos. "Find the others. Remember the protocol." "What protocol?" I yelled back, but Mike wasn't listening. With strength I didn't know he possessed, he shoved me towards the open window. "Run!" he screamed one last time before turning to face our attackers. I tumbled out onto the fire escape, the cool night air shocking me into action. Without thinking, I scrambled down the metal stairs, the sounds of gunfire and shouting fading behind me. As I hit the street and started running, a new awareness crept over me. The city, which had always been a comforting backdrop to my life, suddenly felt alien and threatening. Every security camera seemed to swivel in my direction. Traffic lights changed as I approached, either helping or hindering my escape. I couldn't tell which. I ducked into an alley, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had just happened. Mike's words echoed in my mind. Find the others. Remember the protocol. But I didn't remember. The memory wipe had taken that from me, along with so much else. As I leaned against the grimy alley wall, my hand brushed against something in my pocket. The list of names. I pulled it out, studying it in the dim light from a nearby street lamp. 10 names. 10 targets. But were they really the enemy as Mike had claimed, or was I being used as a pawn in some larger game? A noise at the end of the alley made me look up. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the streetlights. For a moment my heart raced, thinking I'd been found. But then the figure spoke, and the voice was achingly familiar. "Took you long enough," the woman said, stepping into the light. It was the redhead from the park. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me too. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "How do you fit into all this?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm your partner, your confidant, and if necessary, your executioner. Now come on, we've got work to do, and time is running out." As I followed her out of the alley and into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking further into the conspiracy with every step. The city loomed around us, a maze of secrets and hidden agendas. And somewhere in the shadows, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. I just hoped I'd live long enough to find it. The damp, musty air of the underground tunnels filled my nostrils as I followed the red-headed woman deeper into the labyrinth beneath the city. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the graffiti-covered walls. As we walked, I found myself instinctively recognizing cryptic markers etched into the concrete, symbols that seemed to guide our path. "How do I know these signs?" I muttered, more to myself than to my companion. She glanced back at me, a hint of a smile on her lips. Muscle memory. Some things are too deeply ingrained for even the most advanced memory wipe to erase completely. We turned a corner, and I saw a symbol that made me stop in my tracks. An eye within a pyramid, identical to the tattoo on my wrist. As I stared at it, a fragment of memory surfaced. Myself, painting this very symbol on the wall, my hands steady despite the weight of its meaning. "We're close," the woman said, breaking me out of my reverie. "The others are waiting." "Others?" I asked, quickening my pace to catch up with her. "What others?" She didn't answer, instead pushing open a heavy metal door that I hadn't even noticed was there. The room beyond was dimly lit, but I could make out several figures huddled around a makeshift table. As we entered, they looked up, and I was struck by the haunted look in their eyes. It was a look I recognized from my own reflection, the confusion and fear of a mind grappling with missing pieces. A man with a scraggly beard and wild eyes approached us. "You made it," he said, his voice hoarse. We were starting to worry. "Worry about what?" I asked, looking around the room. "What is this place?" The bearded man exchanged a glance with the redhead. "He doesn't remember," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," she replied. The wipe was more thorough than we anticipated. I felt a surge of frustration. "Would someone please tell me what's going on? Who are you people?" An older man stepped forward, his face kind but his eyes sharp and assessing. He had a grandfatherly air about him, with wispy white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "We are the Forgotten," he said, his voice soft but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "Like you, we've all sacrificed our memories for the greater good. But unlike you, We've started to remember. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of these strangers who somehow felt familiar. And what is this greater good we've supposedly sacrificed for? The old man smiled sadly. To save the world, of course, from those who would reshape it in their image. His words echoed what Mike had told me, sending a chill down my spine. The Watchman, I murmured. The group tensed at the name, exchanging nervous glances. Yes, the old man said. We are, or were, part of the Watchmen. But we discovered that the organization had been corrupted from within. The very people we thought we were fighting against had infiltrated our ranks. I felt a headache building behind my eyes as I tried to process this information. And the memory wipes? A failsafe, the redhead explained, to protect the mission if any of us were captured. But it also served another purpose, to keep us from questioning our orders. The old man nodded, but some of us began to remember. And what we remembered? Well, it changed everything. I looked at him, a glimmer of hope kindling in my chest. Can you help me remember too? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. We have methods, but I must warn you the process can be painful, and there's no guarantee of success. I'll take that risk, I said without hesitation. The old man led me to a chair in the corner of the room. Next to it was a machine that looked like a cross between an old computer and medical equipment. As he began attaching electrodes to my temples, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A single strand of long red hair clinging to his sleeve. I glanced at the red-headed woman, who was watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. Was it her hair? Or was there another redhead involved in all this? Before I could voice my concerns, the old man flipped a switch and the machine whirred to life. A low hum filled the air, and I felt a tingling sensation spreading from the electrodes. Relax, the old man said soothingly. Let the memories come. Suddenly, it was as if a dam had broken in my mind. Images, sounds, and sensations flooded my consciousness, overwhelming in their intensity. I saw myself in a dimly lit room, surrounded by masked figures. Do you swear to uphold the principles of the Watchman? A voice asked. To sacrifice everything, even your own identity, for the greater good? I swear, I heard myself say, my voice filled with conviction. The scene shifted. I was in an opulent office, facing a man whose face I couldn't quite make out. The list, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. These people stand in the way of progress. They must be eliminated. Another flash. The woman from the alley, her eyes wide with fear. Please, she begged. I have a family. But my hand didn't waver as I raised the gun. More images came in rapid succession. Secret meetings, covert operations, lives ended with cold efficiency. I saw myself becoming harder, more ruthless with each mission. And then, a revelation that shook me to my core. I was in a darkened room, eavesdropping on a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. The Watchmen have served their purpose, a familiar voice said. With a jolt, I realized it was the old man who was even now overseeing my memory recovery. It's time to tie up loose ends. And the agents? Another voice asked. Wipe them, all of them, then dispose of them. We can't risk them remembering and exposing the truth. The memory faded, and I found myself back in the underground room, gasping for breath. The old man was looking at me with concern, but there was something else in his eyes now, a calculation that sent a chill down my spine. What did you see? He asked, his voice gentle but insistent. I looked around the room at the faces of these people who claimed to be my allies. But were they? Or was this just another layer of deception? I'm not sure, I lied, my mind racing. It's all jumbled. I need time to process it. The old man nodded, seemingly satisfied. Of course, rest now. We'll talk more later. As he turned away, I caught the red-headed woman's eye. There was a question in her gaze, a silent communication that I somehow understood. She knew I was lying. But why wasn't she saying anything? I leaned back in the chair, feigning exhaustion while my mind worked furiously. The memories I had recovered painted a picture far more complex and sinister than I had imagined. The watchman, the memory wipes, the list of targets. It was all part of a larger plan. But what was the end game? And who was really pulling the strings? One thing was clear. I couldn't trust anyone in this room. Not the old man with his kindly facade. Not the redhead with her inscrutable motives. Not even my own fragmented memories. As I closed my eyes, pretending to rest, I began to formulate a plan. I needed to get out of here to find the truth on my own. But first, I had to play along, to let them think their memory recovery had worked. Because now, more than ever, I understood the power of secrets, and I intended to keep mine close until I could unravel this conspiracy once and for all. The underground room hummed with tension and unspoken truths. Above us, the city carried on, oblivious to the machinations happening beneath its streets. But soon, very soon, everything would change, and I would be the one to set it all in motion. The flood of memories hit me like a tsunami, each wave bringing with it a new revelation, a new horror. I gasped, my eyes flying open as the full weight of the truth crashed down upon me. "My God," I whispered, my voice trembling. I remember everything." The old man leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that I now recognized as dangerous. "Tell me," he urged. "What do you remember?" I looked around the room, at the faces of the others. My fellow victims, I now realized. They watched me with a mixture of hope and fear, unaware of the monster in their midst. "The experiment," I began, my voice growing stronger as the memories solidified. Project Tabula Rasa. It wasn't just about creating the perfect agent. It was about creating the perfect puppet. The old man's smile widened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Go on," he encouraged. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. "We volunteered, all of us. We thought we were serving a greater good, protecting our country. But it was all a lie. In my mind's eye, I saw the sterile lab, the banks of computers, the cold steel of the memory suppression device. I heard the screams of the test subjects as their minds were torn apart and reconstructed. The first trials were brutal," I continued, opening my eyes to gauge the room's reaction. The others were listening intently, some nodding as if my words were triggering their own buried memories. So many lost, their minds shattered, their identities erased completely. The red-headed woman stepped forward, her face pale. "I remember the screams," she said softly. "I thought they were just nightmares, but—" I nodded, acknowledging her pain while keeping my focus on the old man. His eager expression hadn't changed, but there was a new tension in his posture. "But you perfected it, didn't you?" I said, addressing him directly now. "You found a way to selectively erase memories, to implant new ones, to create the perfect, obedient agent." The old man's smile faltered for a moment, then returned full force. "Impressive," he said. "Your recall is remarkably clear, but please continue. What else do you remember?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the hardest part. "I remember the night it all went wrong. The night we killed an innocent." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. "It was supposed to be a simple extraction," I said, the words coming faster now as the memories tumbled out. "A defector with valuable information. But something went wrong. The intel was bad, or maybe it was a setup, we still don't know." I saw it all again in vivid detail. The quiet suburban home, the startled face of the man who opened the door, the flash of my gun as it went off prematurely. "He wasn't the target," I said, my voice breaking. "He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. A father, home early from work to surprise his kids." The others in the room shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others nodding in grim recognition. "We panicked," I continued. "We called it in, expecting to be extracted to face the consequences, but that's not what happened, is it? I looked directly at the old man now, accusation in my eyes. He met my gaze unflinchingly. "No," he said softly. "It's not." "You saw an opportunity," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "A chance to test the ultimate failsafe of your memory wipe technology. You offered us a choice. Face prosecution and destroy the project, or submit to a memory wipe and continue our mission." The old man stood, his kindly facade dropping away to reveal the cold, calculating mind beneath. "And you chose to forget," he said. "All of you. So eager to escape your guilt, to continue believing you were heroes." A murmur of disbelief and anger rippled through the room as the others began to understand the full scope of the deception. "But it wasn't just about covering up one mistake, was it?" I pressed, rising to face him. "You saw the potential. Memory-wiped agents, their moral compasses reset with each mission, the perfect tools for your twisted games of power and control." The old man laughed, a chilling sound devoid of humor. "Twisted? I prefer to think of it as efficient. Why waste years training agents when you can simply repurpose them?" As he spoke, I noticed his hand moving slowly towards his pocket. I tensed, ready to act. "And the list?" I asked, stalling for time. "The people we were supposed to eliminate?" "Obstacles," he said dismissively. "People who got too close to the truth, or who stood in the way of our greater vision. You were to be my cleanup crew, tidying up loose ends before moving on to larger targets." Suddenly, alarms began to blare throughout the underground complex. The old man's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "What have you done?" he snarled, all pretense of civility gone. I allowed myself a grim smile. "I activated the emergency beacon while you were monologuing. The authorities will be here any minute." The room erupted into chaos. The other memory-wiped agents, now fully aware of their manipulation, turned on the old man with fury in their eyes. In the confusion, I lunged for the memory device, ripping it from its moorings. The old man saw me and reached for his weapon, but the red-headed woman was faster. She tackled him, sending them both crashing to the floor. "Go!" she yelled at me over the din of the alarms. "Save the others!" I hesitated for a split second, then nodded. With the memory device clutched to my chest, I sprinted for the exit. As I ran through the twisting tunnels, my mind raced. How many other facilities like this one existed? How many other memory-wiped agents were out there, unknowingly doing the bidding of monsters like the old man? I burst out onto the street, the cool night air a shock after the stifling underground. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. My hand went to my pocket, feeling the list of names, the targets I had been assigned to eliminate. But now I understood their true significance. They weren't enemies to be neutralized. They were potential allies, people who might know pieces of the larger puzzle. As I melted into the shadows of the city, the memory device a comforting weight in my arms, I made a vow. I would find the others, restore their memories, and expose the truth behind Project Tabula Rasa. The old man and his cohorts had unleashed a power they couldn't control, playing God with people's minds and lives. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had given us the ability to forget. And now, we remembered. And with those memories came a burning desire for justice, for redemption, and for revenge. The hunt was on, but this time, I was no longer the puppet. I was the puppeteer, and I would use every trick, every skill they had given me to bring their entire corrupt empire crashing down. As I disappeared into the night, the city pulsing around me, I allowed myself a grim smile. The city streets blurred around me as I ran, the memory device clutched tightly to my chest. My heart pounded in sync with my footsteps, each beat a reminder of the precious little time I had left. The list of names burned in my pocket, no longer targets, but potential allies in the fight against the conspiracy that had stolen our lives. I ducked into an alley, catching my breath as I pulled out the list. 10 names, 10 lives to save, 10 pieces of the puzzle to put back together. All right, I muttered to myself. Let's do this. The first name on the list was Sarah Chen, a software engineer. My restored memories told me she had been working on an AI system that could predict future events with uncanny accuracy. The old man and his organization had seen her as a threat. I found her in a 24-hour diner, nursing a cup of coffee with shaking hands. As I slid into the booth across from her, her eyes widened in recognition and fear. "It's okay," I said softly, holding up my hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you remember." Her brow furrowed. "Remember what?" I placed the memory device on the table between us. Everything. An hour later, Sarah emerged from the fog of restored memories, tears streaming down her face. "Oh God," she whispered. "What have we done?" I squeezed her hand. "What they made us do. But now we can make it right." She nodded, a fire kindling in her eyes. "What's next?" "We find the others," I said, standing up. "And we bring this whole thing down." The next name on the list was Marcus Holloway, a former Navy SEAL turned investigative journalist. We found him holed up in a seedy motel, paranoid and armed. "Stay back," he yelled as we entered his room, gun trained on us. I raised my hand slowly. "Marcus, listen to me. You know me. You know us. You just can't remember right now." His hand wavered. "What are you talking about?" Sarah stepped forward. "Let us show you." One by one, we tracked down the others. A quantum physicist, a high-ranking government official, a master hacker. With each restored memory, our team grew stronger, and the pieces of the conspiracy became clearer. But we weren't the only ones moving. The old man and his loyal subjects were hot on our heels, desperately trying to maintain control of their crumbling empire. As we restored the memories of the seventh person on our list, a brilliant biochemist named Dr. Amelia Reeves, all hell broke loose. "They're here," Marcus shouted, his military training kicking in as he spotted the black SUVs converging on our location. "We need to split up," I said, making a quick decision. "Sarah, take Amelia and finish restoring her memories. Marcus, you're with me. We'll draw them off." As we scattered, the city around us descended into chaos. News of the conspiracy had begun to leak, and people were taking to the streets in protest. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the sky was lit by the glow of fires. Marcus and I weaved through the crowded streets, dodging protesters and riot police alike. "We need to get to higher ground," I panted as we ran. "I know a place," Marcus replied, leading us down a side street. We emerged onto the roof of an abandoned office building, the city spread out before us like a war zone. In the distance, we could see the old man's headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper that seemed to mock the chaos below. "That's where we need to go," I said, pointing. "That's where this all ends." Marcus nodded grimly. "It's not going to be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," I replied with a grim smile. We made our way across the city, reuniting with the others as we went. By the time we reached the base of the skyscraper, our group had swelled to nearly 30, all of the memory-wiped agents we had managed to find and restore. But the old man was ready for us. As we approached the building, we were met by a wall of armed security. "Stand down!" a familiar voice boomed over a loudspeaker. The old man emerged from the building, flanked by his most loyal subjects. "You've already lost. The world isn't ready for the truth." I stepped forward, facing him down. "That's not for you to decide anymore." He sneered. "And who's going to stop me? You? A bunch of broken puppets trying to play hero?" "No," I replied calmly. "Them." As if on cue, the crowd behind us parted, revealing Sarah Chen with a laptop in her hands. "It's done," she called out. "The truth is out. All of it. Every dirty secret, every manipulation, every crime. It's all over the internet, impossible to erase." The old man's face contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you've done?" I nodded. "We've set the truth free." With a roar of fury, he lunged forward, a gun appearing in his hand. Time seemed to slow as I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. In that moment, I made my choice. I dove forward, tackling the old man as the gun went off. We crashed to the ground, struggling for control of the weapon. "It's over," I growled, pinning him down. "You've lost." But even as I said the words, I felt a sharp pain in my side. Looking down, I saw blood spreading across my shirt. The old man grinned maniacally. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." As my vision began to blur, I saw my team rushing forward, subduing the old man and his remaining loyal subjects. The memory device lay on the ground nearby, miraculously undamaged in the scuffle. With the last of my strength, I reached for it. "Sarah," I called weakly. She knelt beside me, tears in her eyes. "What are you doing?" I pressed the device into her hands. "Finish it. Make sure everyone knows the truth. But me. I need you to wipe my memories one last time." Her eyes widened in shock. "But why? After everything we've been through?" I managed a weak smile. "Because someone needs to be the failsafe. If something goes wrong, if they try to cover this up again, there needs to be someone out there who can start over, who can find the truth again." Marcus joined us, his face grim. "He's right. It's the only way to ensure the truth survives no matter what." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. We'll never forget what you've done for us. Even if you will." As she activated the device, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The world around me began to fade, the sounds of the chaotic city growing distant. "Good luck," I whispered, looking at the faces of my friends, faces I knew I would soon forget. "Make it count." The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the dawn breaking over the city skyline. A new day, a new beginning, and then nothing. I woke up in a strange bed, in a room I didn't recognize. My head throbbed and my mind felt empty. A nurse entered the room, smiling kindly. "Good morning, how are you feeling?" I blinked, trying to gather my thoughts. I don't know. Where am I? Who am I?" Her smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "You've been in an accident. Don't worry, it's normal to be confused. Your memory should return in time." As she checked my vitals, I noticed something on my wrist, a small tattoo of an eye within a pyramid. For some reason, the sight of it filled me with a sense of purpose I couldn't explain. "Rest now," the nurse said, heading for the door. "You've got a long road ahead of you." As she left, I stared out the window at the city beyond. Something told me that this was just the beginning of a much larger story. And somehow I knew I had to be ready for whatever came next. The truth was out there, and I had a feeling I was going to find it, one way or another.